You're standing in a quiet 1920s garden, revolver in hand, trench coat draped over your shoulders, and you're here for one impossible mission: to end your grandfather before he ever meets your grandmother. The air smells like pipe tobacco and lilacs. Somewhere nearby, your family line is about to go extinct. Except that can't happen, right? Because you're already here. That's the grandfather paradox in a nutshell. If you go back and prevent your own existence, who exactly did the traveling? Close your eyes and let's drift back through 50 time travel paradoxes that just might blow your mind. Tonight, we wander into the time travel assassination paradox. Your feet crunch over gravel as you creep closer to the target. Let's call him Harold. And you can feel your timeline hiccuping with every step. Reality isn't sure whether to continue rendering you. This paradox isn't just theory. It's a cosmic insult to logic, a narrative glitch. If you succeed in erasing Harold, you erase yourself. But then who erased Harold? Round and round we go, a paradox spiraling like a draining bathtub. And now, for fun, let's say you do it. Boom. Harold's gone. The universe doesn't blink out. It just slides sideways. You begin to fade like a cheap Instagram filter. Your memories grow smudged. Suddenly, it's unclear whether your name is Derek or Denise. Both sound right. Neither make sense. This is the stuff that keeps physicists awake at night and philosophers in permanent eye-roll mode. Mainstream science, like classical physics, says, nope, causality must be preserved. You can't create a situation where your very presence becomes an impossibility. Nature abhors contradiction, after all. But fringe theorists, oh, they get spicy. Some argue the universe might resolve the paradox by creating an alternate timeline. Poof, a splinter reality where Harold is toast, but your own origin remains intact in another dimension. You're now stranded in a ghost timeline, doomed to open mic poetry nights with no audience. Worth it? Others suggest you just can't kill Harold. Maybe your gun jams. Maybe a bird swoops in, steals the bullet, and invents steampunk aviation. The Novikov self-consistency principle leans this way. It says, the past is unchangeable in any meaningful way. Every action you take in the past already did happen, so you must have failed. Scientists still argue whether these paradoxes are evidence that time travel is impossible, or that our understanding of causality is laughably incomplete. And now here's a twist. What if you're not trying to kill Harold at all? What if you go back to save him from something else, and in doing so, accidentally prevent your own motivation to time travel in the first place? It's the same loop, but with extra guilt. Time, it seems, loves a cruel joke. As you wander further through Harold's garden, you feel that reality isn't collapsing, it's twitching. Like a video buffering too hard, you try to remember what color your eyes are, but the answer doesn't load. Welcome to Paradox Limbo. And now, here's your quirky detail for the night. One famous time travel short story involves a guy who keeps going back in time to stop his own time travel experiments and ends up fighting increasingly violent versions of himself. A full-on multiverse bar fight. You probably wouldn't survive that. So what's the takeaway here, sleepy traveler? If you ever do build a time machine, maybe don't use it on your family tree, at least not before brunch. Before we keep going, hit like and subscribe if you're into this kind of bedtime podcast, and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this reaches. You stumble backward from the paradox, brain feeling like it's been microwaved on low for too long. The gravel path beneath your feet slowly dissolves, replaced by a chrome-floored corridor humming with energy. It smells faintly of ozone and bubblegum. Welcome to the Bootstrap Paradox, arguably the universe's way of saying, guess what? Time has no chill. Here's the scene. You wake up tomorrow to find a strange book on your doorstep. It's got your name on it, and inside, typed neatly in your favorite font, is everything you're ever going to invent, write, or do. You use it to become world famous. Problem is, you never actually wrote the book. You just found it. But here's the kicker. You eventually send it back in time to your younger self. So who wrote it? That, dear dreamer, is the Bootstrap Paradox. A loop of information or object that exists without any clear origin. Self-created, self-contained, smugly untraceable. The name bootstrap comes from the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, an impossible action that somehow keeps happening in time travel stories like this. Mainstream physics is deeply uncomfortable with this. It doesn't technically break causality, because everything still happens in the same order, but it sure makes a mess of logic. Information or objects that come from nowhere. You'd think the universe would have a stricter no-loitering policy. Here's the mainstream fact. This paradox shows up a lot in science fiction. Like when a character gets a piece of futuristic tech from the future, uses it in the present, and then it becomes the very tech that gets sent back again. There's no inventor, no moment of inspiration, just an infinite feedback loop of meh. But wait, it gets quirkier. In one of the more ridiculous theoretical scenarios, scientists have toyed with the idea of a violin appearing from nowhere. A traveler finds one, goes back in time, gives it to Bach, who becomes famous, and then the violin gets passed on until it ends up back with the traveler. But no one built the violin. It's just always been there. Apparently, time travel turns even classical music into a logic puzzle. Scientists still argue whether this paradox disqualifies time travel entirely, or simply points to a different structure of reality, like a Mobius strip made of cause and effect. Some think the only way out is to accept that certain things can exist in closed loops, forever untraceable. Others, perhaps more grounded, suggest that these loops break down under scrutiny because they defy entropy. Where does wear and tear go in a self-cloning violin? Wouldn't it degrade after every pass? And now for your nightly existential side dish. What if you are part of a bootstrap loop? Maybe your weird talent for remembering song lyrics isn't talent. It's just something future you sent backward. And maybe the reason you feel déjà vu so often is because your own memories are eating themselves. You keep walking. The corridor pulses softly now, and you spot a mirror on the wall. In it, your reflection looks slightly older, wearing different clothes. Is that future you, past you, or just you having forgotten what you wore to bed? Impossible to say. Time's being rude again. You glance down at your hands. Are you holding something you didn't pick up? A letter, a recipe, a quantum thumb drive with next year's cryptocurrency secrets? It doesn't matter. If it came from you and goes back to you, maybe you've officially joined the club. Congratulations, you're your own mentor or plagiarist. And if your head's starting to spin, that's fine. The bootstrap paradox doesn't want to be solved. It wants to hum gently in your subconscious like a song you can't remember downloading. Next time you misplace your keys, consider this. Maybe you never bought them. Maybe you handed them to yourself in a forgotten loop. And if you didn't, who did? Sleep tight, loop kid. The hallway begins to stretch, curving subtly until it forms a perfect circle, just like your fate in tonight's next paradox. As you glide along, the lights flicker with purpose. Something in the walls is whispering your name backwards. Welcome to the predestination paradox, where trying to stop the future makes the future happen. Yes, your attempt to rewrite destiny might just be destiny's favorite method of recruitment. Let's say you time travel back to stop a disaster, a fire maybe, the big one. You know when and where. You rush in with noble intentions, and you accidentally knock over a lantern. Whoops, that's right. You caused it. The very reason you wanted to change the past is because your future self already did change it into the thing you were trying to avoid. It's the paradoxical equivalent of slapping yourself in the face and then being surprised you're in pain. Mainstream physics doesn't love this paradox, but it doesn't entirely reject it either. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, time is a dimension. Past, present, and future all exist on the same cosmic block, just different coordinates. So maybe the future can't be changed, not because it's forbidden, but because it's already done. You are always going to go back. You are always going to cause the event. It's not just dry theory. This is prime sci-fi real estate. Think of movies where the hero becomes the villain by trying not to, or the anonymous figure in the past turns out to be you in a wig. It's poetic, annoying, and maybe unavoidable. Your quirky fact for the night? There's an old urban legend about a man who travels back to warn a famous ruler of an assassination attempt, only to realize later that his arrival was what tipped off the killer. History's version of, surprise, it was me all along. Awkward. Scientists still argue whether this paradox is proof that time travel has to be a closed loop, or whether we're just clinging to causality because it comforts us. There are even theories that free will is an illusion in these loops, that your choices were always part of the script, and you're just acting out lines written by your own shadow. The corridor you're walking in starts looping, literally. You pass a door marked "Do Not Enter," and 30 seconds later, you pass it again and again, until you get curious. You open it, and inside, another version of you, opening the same door, over and over. Neither of you looks surprised. Of course this is happening. You were always going to open the door. It's basically a cosmic rerun. Here's where it gets personal. What if your worst mistakes were never mistakes? What if you were always meant to send that text, miss that train, or spill coffee on that stranger who became your best friend? Or, your mild enemy with great cheekbones. You pause for a moment and wonder, if someone from the future is watching you now, trying to stop something, would you even know? Or would their interference just become your story? Maybe your entire life has already been nudged by someone trying not to. Even sleep itself is a kind of paradox, isn't it? You lie down to escape time, only to wake up closer to your fate. One breath forward, always. So tonight, as you drift, imagine that whatever you're doing, you were meant to. Or maybe you're about to become the cause of something epic, or tragic, or hilariously petty. Either way, thanks for playing your part in the loop. You never had a choice. You exit the loop and find yourself in a dusty antique shop, lit by flickering candlelight and humming with a kind of timeless electricity. The shelves are lined with old clocks, gears, mirrored sunglasses, and a velvet rope that's somehow growing moss. In the center stands a life-size cardboard cutout of, wait, is that you? A version of you, anyway. Slightly older, or younger. Hard to tell. Welcome to the time traveler's doppelganger crisis, where the biggest threat to the timeline might just be your own smug face. You wander in deeper, feeling the bizarre thrill of imagining what it would be like to meet another you. And not in a cute mirror talk kind of way, but face-to-face, breath-matching, posture-copying, eyes knowing too much kind of way. Congratulations, you've become your own paradox. The doppelganger issue comes up every time someone considers what happens when a time traveler overlaps with a version of themselves, and not just sees them from a distance, but actually interacts, talks, argues, maybe gives them a snack, maybe steals their haircut. The question becomes, what happens when two versions of you occupy the same point in space-time? The mainstream scientific view, especially under quantum mechanics or general relativity, is a resounding, please no. It makes the math angry. Some interpretations suggest this overlap might cause a disturbance so significant it collapses the fabric of space-time around you. Others are more lenient, suggesting nothing more than a mild identity crisis and a headache shared between versions. But don't worry, the fringe theorists have spicier takes. One theory suggests if you meet your past self, you create a dual reality, a forked path where both versions now coexist, but are permanently unsynced. You move forward with knowledge of the meeting, while your younger self can no longer play dumb. Reality adapts, but slightly twitchier. Now here's your quirky detail. Some folklore, way before quantum physics got involved, claimed that seeing your doppelganger was an omen of death, either theirs or yours, or both. One 18th century German poet reportedly saw his double walking calmly toward him on a quiet road. Not long after, he died under mysterious circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. Cue creaky door sound. Scientists still argue whether the universe allows physical doubles to overlap, especially ones that share identical molecular signatures. What if you shook hands, hugged, played rock, paper, scissors? Would the atoms rebel? Would time itself glitch like a broken video game, freezing in place or just buffering forever? You notice a framed sign in the antique shop now, glowing faintly under candlelight. It reads, "Rule number 1, don't touch yourself, even accidentally." Well, that escalated. You look to your left. Another version of you is inspecting a clock, confused. Then, in perfect synchronization, you both turn and lock eyes. It's like staring into your own browser history. Fascinating, alarming, deeply personal. You both raise a hand, wave, and suddenly, a burst of memory hits. Flashes of things you don't remember doing. A new scar, a forgotten song lyric, the unmistakable knowledge of having already said this exact sentence. Somewhere, causality just tripped over its own shoelaces. And that's the real crisis. Not just that you met yourself, but that you can't tell who's the copy. Who's from when? Did they come back? Or did you? Some theories suggest that every meeting with yourself slightly unravels your sense of self. Like overlapping phone calls with bad reception, your identities begin to bleed. Memories misalign. You start craving foods you never liked. You suddenly know how to juggle, or knit, or flirt in Esperanto. So here's your takeaway for the night. If you ever run into yourself in an antique shop, or anywhere, maybe just nod politely and keep walking. One of you needs to survive, probably. You exit through a door that wasn't there before. It leads to a train platform labeled yesterday. Your other self boards a different one. Tomorrow. Neither of you looks back. The train rumbles gently beneath your feet, a soothing hum like a lullaby for confused physicists. Outside the window, you see stars bend like molasses, warping around something invisible and impatient. The air on the train is thick with tension, and the faint smell of orange peel. As you move toward the dining car, you notice a table with just one thing on it. A pool table with a single ball aimed straight at a wormhole. Welcome aboard the Polchinski paradox, a thought experiment where you play ping-pong with causality until it breaks your nose. Imagine this. You have a billiard ball. You aim it perfectly into a wormhole. Yes, just casually laying there in your basement, and it pops out the other side before you shot it in. Sounds like fun. But then something weird happens. The ball emerges, loops back, and smacks its earlier self off course, preventing it from entering the wormhole in the first place. So if the ball never entered, how did it exit? And if it didn't exit, what knocked it off course? This paradox was cooked up by physicist Joseph Polchinski as a way to challenge the idea of closed time-like curves, which are basically time loops in space-time predicted by general relativity. These loops might exist around rotating black holes or cosmic strings, those theoretical spaghetti strands of ultra-dense matter from the early universe. No, they're not edible. Mainstream science takes this paradox seriously. Well, seriously enough to go wide-eyed and mutter things like non-linear self-interactions. It's one of the rare cases where physicists toss a pool ball into the time stream and say, okay, now let's see if the math explodes. The quirk here? Unlike other paradoxes, the Polchinski version might actually resolve itself. Some calculations suggest the ball would always knock itself slightly, just enough to still go through the wormhole, but not disrupt its own entry completely. A little nudge instead of a total block. Reality, it seems, may have a gentle preference for consistency, like your grandma rewriting history just a bit every time she tells that story. But scientists still argue whether that kind of solution is baked into the universe, or whether it's just us forcing logic onto something way too weird to contain. Are there infinite nudges that still work? Or does one nudge spawn 1,000 branching timelines, each more ridiculous than the last? One of them definitely ends with the billiard ball becoming president. You glance down at the pool table in front of you. There's no cue stick, just a glove and a handwritten note. Try not to mess this up again. The ball is already moving, slowly, almost like it's waiting for your hand to tremble. Suddenly, the air gets heavier. You feel a loop forming, curling through the room like invisible ribbon. There's a slight breeze coming from the wormhole, and it smells like chalk and regret. You hesitate. What if your future self already took the shot? What if the outcome's already decided, and you're just pretending to have agency? What if the loop needs you to screw up? In this paradox, your intention doesn't matter. What matters is the outcome that doesn't contradict itself. The timeline will bend, stretch, maybe even whisper rude things under its breath, but it won't break. You can't cause an impossible sequence because impossible things don't happen. Still, that doesn't mean things are predictable. It just means reality cheats in creative ways. So tonight, dreamer, as you lie there cocooned in blankets and faint paradox-induced vertigo, ask yourself, if a ball hits itself before it ever moved, did it ever move at all? And what happens when the universe is the one playing pool? Just remember, if you ever see a wormhole on a pool table, maybe just play Uno instead. You step off the train into what looks like a futuristic security checkpoint. Retina scanners, floating drones, and a very suspicious vending machine labeled Chrono Snacks. A stern voice echoes through the glass corridors. Unauthorized paradoxes will be confiscated. Welcome to the realm of chronology protection, where the universe itself might be the biggest stickler for rules. This idea comes from none other than Stephen Hawking, who once suggested that maybe, just maybe, time travel is impossible because we never see time tourists. No one's photobombed the pyramids with a GoPro. No one's shown up to stop Y2K. Not even a single rogue selfie in the Renaissance. So Hawking proposed the chronology protection conjecture, a fancy way of saying, the laws of physics conspire to prevent time travel to the past. The universe, in other words, has its own bouncer, and it doesn't accept paradoxes, time loops, or any kind of temporal funny business. Cosmic no-no. You walk past a bulletin board filled with wanted posters. Temporal trespasser, last seen in 1876 holding an iPhone. Wormhole jaywalker. Future me again. It's hard not to smirk, but also, it's weirdly comforting. If time travel isn't allowed, maybe it's because reality knows we'd totally mess it up. Mainstream physics, particularly quantum field theory and general relativity, actually offer some support. In scenarios where time machines might exist, say, with traversable wormholes or rotating black holes, energy tends to spike into infinity as soon as closed time-like curves appear. It's as if space-time starts panicking, throwing tantrums, and essentially slamming the door shut. Boom. No paradox for you. Here's a quirky twist. There are thought experiments where scientists tried to model time machines using hypothetical materials like exotic matter, stuff with negative energy density. And guess what? You'd need so much of it that you'd basically be asking the universe for a loan it's never going to approve. Plus, interest. Scientists still argue whether chronology protection is a fundamental law or just an emergent behavior, a kind of cosmic instinct for self-preservation. Maybe time doesn't hate us, it just knows better. And yet, despite the lack of verified time tourists, humans keep trying. People have thrown time traveler parties, only advertised after the event, hoping someone from the future would show up. Spoiler, no one did. Unless they were just fashionably invisible. You walk further down the corridor, where a sign reads, "All causal loops must declare themselves at customs." Below it, a bored-looking customs agent flips through a glowing clipboard. You consider telling them you've been dreaming about paradoxes all night. They nod slowly and hand you a sticker. Temporally unstable, but cute. Still, there's a sliver of uncertainty. What if time travel is possible, but only allowed in ways we haven't figured out? Maybe it's locked behind a level of physics so advanced we'd mistake it for myth. Or maybe it's permitted only in the tiniest doses, like dreams, déjà vu, or that moment you feel like you've been somewhere before, but can't quite explain why. And here's a sleepy thought to curl up with. Maybe the universe doesn't need to stop time travel completely. It just needs to make sure it never changes anything important. That way, we can dance around the past without ever stepping on its toes. A cha-cha of causality. So tonight, as you nestle deeper into your blankets, let the rules relax around you. Drift into a world where chronology almost breaks, where a vending machine might sell paradox-free snacks, and where somewhere, somewhen, the universe smiles quietly and resets the timeline, just in case you got too clever. You shuffle away from the checkpoint, past a velvet rope labeled Temporal Clearance Level Classified, and find yourself in a room that feels like it's playing time backward. The walls are pristine, but you can see the dust unfalling from the air. A candle unmelts itself, and in the corner, an old man is becoming a child in reverse. Say hello to the reverse aging paradox, or what we like to call the Benjamin Button fallacy, because time travel doesn't mean your wrinkles get sucked into a void of youth serum. Let's get one thing out of the way. Going backward in time isn't the same as hitting rewind on your biology. You're not going to start speaking in baby talk or lose your molars like a VHS in reverse. But still, if time itself flows in reverse around you, wouldn't your body react? Would you literally grow younger? Forget knowledge? Start craving pudding cups? According to mainstream physics, not quite. Time travel doesn't come with an age reset feature. Even if you could move backward through time, your biological arrow of time still moves forward. Your cells still metabolize. Your stomach still digests. Your bad haircut still needs to grow out. It's like walking up an escalator that's moving down. You're in a reversed environment, but your body's marching to its own chemical drumbeat. Still, it's a fun image. The idea of aging backward has captured imaginations for centuries, from myths of immortality to that one movie where Brad Pitt basically turns into a very confused toddler. But the quirky twist here, in physics, the real Benjamin Button is entropy. Entropy is the universe's way of measuring disorder, and it only moves in one direction, up. Messiness always increases. Ice melts, eggs scramble, cookies tragically get eaten. But if you reverse time, what happens to entropy? Does the cookie reassemble? Does the ice cube hop back into the tray? Does your last breakup unhappen? Some theorists argue that if the entire universe were to reverse its entropy, then yes, your memories, your personality, even your Google search history would run backward. But here's the catch. You wouldn't notice, because your perception would reverse too. You'd unremember everything, experience nothing, and essentially ride backward on a roller coaster with your eyes closed. Scientists still argue whether time's arrow is truly absolute, or just an emergent behavior based on probability. Some fringe thinkers go further, suggesting time is a loop, and that we do reverse again and again, living the same life both forwards and backward for eternity. Sounds exhausting, right? Also, that would mean you've already been old, then young, then old again, possibly a dozen times, just so you could forget it all and complain about the same taxes again. You glance around the room. That man-child in the corner is now a toddler, and he's crawling toward a mirror that's fogging up in reverse. On the mirror, a name, your name, written backward. You touch your face. You don't feel younger. But suddenly, there's this weird memory of a future you haven't lived yet. Standing right here, wondering the same thing. Your body stays rooted in forward motion, but your mind, maybe it's wobbling. Here's something to dream about. If you could reverse your age, would you? Or would you just go back to the same mistakes, the same socks, the same weird haircut phase in middle school? If aging in reverse meant losing your wisdom, your scars, your best, that one time in college story, would it be worth it? Time doesn't owe you symmetry. It just marches forward, and every second that ticks by adds another layer of you. Older, yes, but also better at pretending you understand any of this. So tonight, forget the wrinkles. You've earned them. Let your mind stretch in all directions, even if your body insists on going just one way. Because here's the truth. You're not here to age backward. You're here to move forward through backward time. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're falling asleep from. The walls shift again, melting from sterile white into a soft sepia glow, like you've walked into a vintage newsreel or one of those dusty documentaries with dramatic violins. The scent of cigarette smoke and ambition clings to the air. And just ahead of you, there's a man with a very problematic moustache giving a speech to a crowd that shouldn't be there. Welcome to the paradox that just won't go away, killing Hitler again and again. You've heard the scenario before, probably around the second time someone in your philosophy class said, "Okay, but what if you had a time machine? You go back in time to stop Hitler. You've got a flawless plan. Maybe you sabotage art school. Maybe you swap his baby formula for something more final. You think, that's it, I saved the world." Except, somehow, Hitler still rises. Or worse, someone even more diabolical takes his place. The moustache might be different, the slogan's weirder, but history roars on like a vengeful GPS. Recalculating. This is called a temporal resilience paradox, the idea that certain historical events are so pivotal, so deeply entangled in the web of causality, that the universe simply refuses to let them go. You kill Hitler, and reality just patches the timeline. Maybe someone else unites Germany. Maybe World War II starts over something equally absurd, like a bad haircut treaty, or someone insulting the wrong opera. Mainstream historians scoff, of course, because obviously, Hitler was a product of specific economic, political, and social conditions. Remove him, and someone else could fill the vacuum. But fringe theorists, they start to wonder whether time itself enforces historical inertia, that maybe some events are fixed points, uneditable by even the most determined time vigilante. Scientists still argue whether these so-called fixed points are real or just convenient storytelling devices. One theory suggests that when you alter a major event in the past, you create a branching timeline, one where Hitler never existed, sure, but you're no longer in your own reality. You're stuck, alone, possibly being interrogated in German by someone who thinks jazz is outlawed and elevators should only go sideways. Let's sprinkle in a quirky fact. There's actually a whole subreddit dedicated to alternate Wobby-Watu timelines. Some folks go so far down the butterfly rabbit hole that they end up debating what breakfast cereal people would be eating in 1960 if Hitler had been abducted by Martians in 1932. Spoiler, it's still cornflakes. Some things are eternal. But here's where it gets weirder. What if your attempts to stop Hitler are what caused him to rise in the first place? Maybe your actions inspire his paranoia. Maybe you accidentally drop futuristic tech that gets reverse engineered by bad actors. Maybe your presence becomes a historical footnote that radicalizes someone else. And now you've gone from time-traveling hero to accidental supervillain. As you tiptoe past the crowd in the plaza, a strange feeling tugs at you. Déjà vu, yes, but stronger. Like you've tried this before, dozens of times. Maybe hundreds. Maybe you've killed Hitler 1,000 different ways. And still, here he is. And just maybe, he isn't even the real paradox. Maybe you are. What if the past resists not because of some law of physics, but because you're not supposed to interfere? Or because interfering with a wound this deep only makes it worse? So here's tonight's soft-shell truth. Time isn't a chalkboard you can erase with one swipe. It's more like a vine. Cut one tendril and 100 more snake out, reweaving history into something darker or weirder. You can't stop tragedy with a scalpel if the infection lives in the whole system. Still tempted? That's fine. Just know that the universe has a way of reassigning villains. You cancel one, and the algorithm just suggests another. So dream softly now, future fixer. History doesn't need a hitman. It needs a healer. You step out to the sepia-tinted plaza and into a jungle, lush, tangled, and buzzing with life that doesn't quite belong here. A single step forward crushes something underfoot. You look down and see an ant, a very small, very ordinary ant. And yet, the moment you flatten it, the entire sky flickers like a bad zoom background. You've just triggered the butterfly effect's chaotic cousin, where a seemingly meaningless choice rearranges the cosmos like a toddler redecorating a dollhouse. The idea comes from chaos theory, where tiny changes in initial conditions can lead to dramatically different outcomes. But in the realm of time travel, it gets cranked up to absolute absurdity. Step on an ant in the Jurassic period. Maybe humans evolve with antennae. Sneeze during the signing of the Magna Carta. Suddenly, dogs are in charge of England. Eat the wrong berry in 1832. Now corn doesn't exist. The classic mainstream example. The butterfly effect itself. A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and weeks later, there's a tornado in Texas. The link isn't direct, but the amplification of small shifts can cause big storms. That's nature's version of your typo just caused a revolution. Now let's crank the volume. In time travel terms, the idea is that even the tiniest, most unintentional act in the past could ripple forward in ways you can't predict. Like ordering tea instead of coffee in 1789, and now France is ruled by a group of particularly ambitious squirrels. Here's your quirky tidbit. In one short story, a man goes back in time to hunt dinosaurs. He's warned not to step off the designated path. He does. Squashes a butterfly. Returns to find English now reads like alphabet soup, and the government is run by a totalitarian lizard cult. The message? Don't step on stuff, ever. Scientists still argue whether this level of chaos is even possible. Some suggest that macro history, the big stuff, remains relatively stable, no matter how much micro meddling you do. Others believe even a whisper of difference could trigger a chain of dominoes that collapses your entire reality. It's like trying to adjust one card in a house of cards. While blindfolded, on a trampoline, you wander deeper into the jungle. Trees sway slightly too much. A bird calls out in a voice that sounds like your high school gym teacher. Weird. You find a sign nailed to a tree that reads, "All actions are butterfly wing approved." You sneeze. Somewhere, a continent breaks in half. And here's the paradox. You might not even know you caused it. The ripple is so subtle, so deeply baked into the timeline, that by the time you realize something's changed, the new reality feels totally normal. You won't notice that people are now born with 3 kidneys, or that cereal is spelled with an X. You'll just shrug and keep scrolling. This kind of chaos makes time travel terrifying, not because of grand missions, but because of accidents. Because what if your very presence in the past is disruptive? What if your heartbeat echoes through centuries like a warped metronome? What if history is one big, very sensitive souffle, and you just slam the oven door? So here's the thought to nibble on as you float off tonight. Maybe the scariest paradox isn't failing to change the past. It's succeeding in ways you never meant to. Ways no one can trace. Ways you'll never get to fix. Because even ants, it turns out, are part of the equation. So sleep lightly now, keep your feet still, and if you see a butterfly in your dreams tonight, maybe just wave hello. You brush past the jungle's edge and find yourself in a sterile lab, lights dim, screens flickering, and an eerie silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. On one of the monitors, there's a readout of your vital signs. Another shows an infinite series of flat lines, with one stubborn blip still going. Welcome to quantum immortality and the you that won't die, where Schrödinger's cat is alive, dead, and texting from both realms at once. You sit on the exam table. Everything feels slightly off, as if the room isn't sure whether you're supposed to be here. And that's the vibe of this paradox. You're always here, no matter what. This idea comes out of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Imagine, every time there's a quantum event with multiple outcomes, the universe splits. In one, the toast lands butter side up. In another, tragedy. In yet another, the toast becomes sentient and applies for citizenship. Now apply this to you. In one universe, you trip and fall. In another, you don't. In one, you choke on a pretzel. In another, you live. And here's where things get weird. You only ever experience the versions where you survive. This is quantum immortality. The theory that, subjectively, you always live. Every time you're supposed to die, you instead shift, consciously or not, into the timeline where you didn't. You just keep bouncing, like a very persistent video game character with infinite continues. Mainstream physics doesn't officially endorse this idea. It's more of a fringe interpretation. But it's built on real quantum theory. In the classic Schrödinger's cat thought experiment, the cat is both alive and dead until observed. But if you are the cat, then you never experience the dead outcome. You only perceive the versions where you still exist to perceive. Here's your quirky side note. One physicist actually used this to argue, half-jokingly, that if he were about to die in a particle accelerator mishap, his consciousness would simply shift to a version of reality where it didn't happen. Bold strategy. Also, deeply unnerving. Scientists still argue whether consciousness can actually choose or traverse multiverses like that, or whether we're just grasping for comfort in the face of existential dread. Some argue it's not immortality at all, just an illusion caused by infinite branching. After all, sure, some version of you lives on, but the rest, let's just say, they don't. You look up at the screen again, still flat lines, except that one, flickering stubbornly. You wonder, how many near deaths have you already dodged? How many alternate yous are lying in timelines just slightly different, with slightly less luck? And the real kicker? You'll never know, because in this branch you're fine. You're always fine, until you're not. And even then, some version of you keeps going. Maybe there's a universe where you're reading this on Mars, or from a hospital bed after eating questionable sushi, or sitting comfortably in a cozy timeline where none of this ever happened, and your biggest paradox is why socks disappear in the laundry. So tonight, dreamer, as you drift between consciousness and sleep, consider this. If you can't die, at least not in your own experience, what does that make you? Eternal, cursed, or just a very lucky blip in an infinite roll of cosmic dice? Either way, rest easy. You're still here. You're always here. And in the next timeline, you're probably napping too. You wake up, if that's even the right word anymore, on a stone path that curves in a perfect circle. There's no sky above you, just swirling constellations arranged like a record on loop. As you walk, the path spirals tighter, folding in on itself like a Mobius strip that refuses to stop playing reruns. Welcome to closed time-like curves, where time becomes a literal loop, and you can attend your own birthday party every year from every angle. In theoretical physics, a closed time-like curve or CTC if you want to sound cool at dinner parties, is a path through space-time that returns to its starting point. Imagine if you went on a walk that led you back to where you began, but not just geographically. Temporally, you come back to the exact moment you left, waving awkwardly at yourself, trying not to interrupt your own departure. According to mainstream general relativity, these kinds of loops might exist under certain extreme conditions, usually involving wormholes, rotating black holes, or hypothetical objects like tler cylinders, which are essentially infinitely long spinning sausages of space-time. No, really. If a CTC exists and you manage to ride it, then congratulations, you're in a time donut, a causality churro, a cosmic circle that won't let go. Here's your quirky flavor for the night. In one proposed version of a CTC, a person could send a message to their past self that says, "Don't build a time machine," which their past self obeys, meaning they never build it, meaning they never got the message, meaning they do build it. And we're back in the loop. It's like the worst game of telephone ever, only with physics and identity crises. Scientists still argue whether CTCs are physically possible or just a mathematical curiosity. Some argue that if one existed, it would collapse under the weight of paradoxes and feedback. Others propose that quantum mechanics might allow for self-consistent solutions, where the timeline politely adjusts itself so that nothing breaks, even if it means your time-traveling version always drops the exact same spoon every time. You stop walking the stone path and realize you've passed this exact tree 3 times. You've heard the same owl hoot twice, and it's getting passive-aggressive. On the 4th loop, you notice a note tucked into the tree bark. It's in your handwriting. It reads, "Don't ask the owl any questions. You already did." This is where the weirdness deepens. In a CTC, your future actions can influence your past behavior. Cause and effect go from being a neat row of dominoes to a circular firing squad. And yet, no paradox if the loop is consistent. You always do what you already did. You're trapped in a kind of narrative purgatory, eternal déjà vu with a cosmic shrug. But here's the thing. Maybe loops like this aren't traps. Maybe they're lessons. Maybe you're meant to revisit that moment again and again until you notice something new. Something small, a glint, a sound, a thought you missed the first 3,000 times. So here's a thought to unspool gently as your brain loops towards sleep. What if some dreams are time loops? Little closed circuits your brain travels nightly, replaying images and feelings not for fun, but for calibration. What if you're already living a tiny loop and just don't remember the rest of it? As the stars above you whirl faster, you lie down on the spiral path and let the loop take you again. You've been here before, and if you haven't, you will be. You roll off the spiral path and land softly in what appears to be a spaceship, or maybe a very committed Airbnb. The walls are sterile but cozy, and there are 2 beds. In one, your twin stretches and yawns. In the other bed, you again. One of you looks about 5 years older and smug about it. Welcome to the twin paradox, where one twin takes a joyride near the speed of light and comes back annoyingly youthful. Here's how it works. You and your twin are born at the same time. Identical birthdays, identical noses. But one of you, let's say it's you, decides to hop on a spaceship that zips close to light speed. You spend a few years cruising the galaxy, sipping zero-gravity smoothies, doing cosmic yoga. When you return to Earth, you've barely aged. But your twin? Wrinkly, wiser, probably in a cardigan. This is time dilation, a real, experimentally confirmed feature of Einstein's special relativity. As you approach the speed of light, time slows down. For you, it's not a trick or an illusion. From your perspective, everything seems normal. But when you come back, the rest of the universe has aged dramatically faster. This isn't fringe. This is mainstream physics. In fact, we've tested it. Atomic clocks on satellites tick ever so slightly differently from those on Earth. Without correcting for time dilation, your GPS would be off by kilometers. So yes, you've been time traveling every time you check directions to the nearest late-night taco stand. But let's dig into the quirky implications. The twin paradox has been used in everything from sci-fi novels to philosophical rants at 3 a.m. to explain how time isn't as rigid as we think. There's even a twist. If the traveling twin turns around to come back, that acceleration creates a clear asymmetry. That's why they age less than their stay-at-home sibling, who's just been paying bills and doing crossword puzzles while you were galaxy hopping. Scientists still argue over how to interpret this, especially when we bring in quantum mechanics and try to merge it with relativity. Spoiler, they do not get along. Some go so far as to say the twin paradox raises questions about simultaneity. What does now even mean when time moves at different speeds for different observers? You stand between the beds, looking at both versions of yourself. The older you smiles knowingly. You don't remember this part, do you? They ask. The younger you stares, confused. Wait, which one am I? The ship hums. A timer counts down from 10. One of you is about to board again. You're not sure which. And here's the deeper bite for tonight's dream feast. What if all your missed moments, those weird time gaps where you blink and an hour's gone, aren't just forgetfulness? What if it's microdilation? Tiny fragments where your perception lagged behind reality by a nanosecond, and your timeline warped just a smidge? Or better yet, what if your dreams are the spaceship? Maybe while your body sleeps, your consciousness zips around the relativistic playground. Maybe you're the twin who left every night. So as you settle under your imaginary blanket aboard your light-speed liner, let this paradox rock you gently. Time isn't fair. It stretches, it shrinks, it picks favorites, and sometimes it gives one twin a really great skincare advantage. You slide out of the spaceship, not with a dramatic thud, but like a soft, embarrassed exit from a dream you weren't supposed to have. You're back in a world that smells like old camera flashes and dusty file cabinets. There's a crowd gathered, hushed, watching a black convertible glide through a sunny Dallas street. You already know what happens next. You've tried to stop it a dozen times. Welcome to You Can't Save JFK. Sorry. Where history slams the door every time you knock. This one's the heavy hitter of historical paradoxes. The mission is clear. Go back and prevent a major assassination. You've got perfect timing, futuristic tech, and maybe even a stylish trench coat. You run into the plaza. You shout. Maybe you tackle the guy. Maybe you even succeed. For a second. And then something else happens. A second shooter. A bystander trips you. A butterfly flaps a wing in Tasmania, and someone else pulls the trigger. Boom. Same headline. Different cause. This is the idea of temporal resistance. That certain historical events are so entangled in the causality web that they can't be altered, only rerouted. It's like a GPS that keeps recalculating, but always leads you back to the same end, like a final destination with better haircuts. Mainstream physics doesn't require this to be true. It's not a rule, more like a pattern we keep running into in theoretical models. The universe doesn't explicitly forbid you from changing the past, but it does seem to get weirdly insistent that the big stuff stays put. Here's a quirky nugget to chew on. One fringe theory suggests that even when you go back in time, your presence was always there. So any attempt to change history actually causes it. You didn't save JFK. You distracted the Secret Service. You didn't stop the bullet. You bumped the guy who almost did. Congratulations. You just looped yourself into infamy. Scientists still argue whether events like JFK's assassination are fixed because of physics or because of probability density. There's an argument that the bigger the event, the more pathways reality has to get back to it. You can patch a hole in a canoe, but patching the Titanic, different vibes. And you might be wondering, why that moment? Why do time travelers always go for the headline stuff? JFK, Hitler, the Titanic, Area 51, Taco Tuesday. It's because those moments feel like pivot points. But what if they're not? What if the real changes, the ones that matter, are invisible? Like a letter that never got mailed. A child who wasn't afraid that day. A stranger who saw everything and chose to remember. You lean against the fence in Dealey Plaza. The crowd around you holds their breath. You already know how this ends. And yet, you feel it again. The ache to fix something that refuses to be fixed. You could yell, run, try. But this time, you don't. And that, paradoxically, might be the change. You walk away as the motorcade rolls on. Not because you gave up, but because maybe, just maybe, history needs witnesses more than heroes. Maybe the real power of time travel isn't in changing the past, but in understanding it so completely that you change the future instead. So as you return to your pillow, backlit by memory and melancholy, let this thought rock you gently. You can't save everyone. You might not even save anyone. But you were there. You saw. You tried. And sometimes that echo is all history needs. You blink, and Dealey Plaza melts into marble columns and endless shelves, stretching so far they fade into darkness. There's no sound except the soft flutter of turning pages. The books around you have no titles on their spines, no authors, just quiet. Infinite quiet. Welcome to the Library of Babel's temporal shelves, where every book that ever was, or could be, already exists, including the one that predicts exactly what you're about to do next. This concept was first imagined by Jorge Luis Borges, a man who clearly had access to either a time machine or way too much coffee. In his story, the Library of Babel contains every possible book of a certain length, made from a fixed set of characters. That means it holds every coherent book, and every gibberish variant of it. Somewhere, there's a book that perfectly recounts your entire life. And somewhere else, one that's off by one comma. Now throw in time travel. You reach for a shelf. Your hand lands on a thick volume titled How You Prevented World War III, using a toaster and mild charisma. It's written in your handwriting. You flip a few pages. Oddly enough, it feels familiar. This is the paradox. If you go into the future, grab knowledge, and bring it back to now, where did that knowledge come from? This loops us right back into Bootstrap territory, but layered with something even stranger. Informational recursion. A book written because it was read. A future learned because it was remembered. Mainstream physics doesn't support this library literally, of course. It's a metaphor. But information theory? That's where it gets juicy. The idea that time travel could let you cheat by accessing knowledge you never earned. Imagine inventing a cure because you read it in a book you haven't written yet. Who's the author? You The future you? Or the book itself? Here's your quirky detail. In the original library of Babel concept, most of the books are nonsense. Statistically speaking, the overwhelming majority are filled with jumbled letters, which means that somewhere, a perfect history of the 22nd century is shelved right next to a book titled Skibbity Toilet. And good luck telling the difference. Scientists still argue whether information can exist in a loop without an origin. Some say it violates entropy. Others argue that as long as the loop is consistent, it doesn't need an author. It only needs a reader. That's you, by the way. You walk deeper into the library. Each shelf whispers gently. Some call your name. Others mutter dates that haven't happened yet. You find a slim, dusty volume titled Your Next Dream. You open it, and it's blank, but only until you blink. Words begin to appear. Softly, tentatively, describing what you're doing right now. Breathing, reading, doubting. And you realize something. If every possible future is already written, then reading one could lock it in. Or perhaps worse, eliminate all others. So here's the soft, dreamy riddle for tonight. Is knowledge from the future a gift or a trap? Does knowing what's to come help you avoid mistakes? Or make you walk straight into them? Because maybe the scariest book isn't the one that reveals everything. Maybe it's the one that reveals nothing, because your choices haven't been written yet. So drift off now, among the shelves of maybe and might have been. The books are quiet, the pages are watching, and somewhere a story waits for your next move. You slip the book back into its place, and the entire library exhales. The walls ripple, the shelves flatten, and suddenly you're not in a building anymore. You're staring up at the night sky, somewhere in a desert. Your footprints the only ones in the dust. There are no cities, no satellites, no spaceports, just silence. Unbroken, cosmic silence. Welcome to the Fermi paradox. The aliens already left, where time travel might explain why we're so very, very alone. The Fermi paradox asks a simple question. If intelligent life is common in the universe, then where is everybody? With billions of stars and even more planets, we should have heard something by now. A ping, a blip, a polite cosmic voicemail. But nope, just static. Now add time travel to the mix. What if aliens were here, but in a different when? One idea, whispered among fringe theorists, is that extraterrestrials may have developed time travel instead of space travel. Think about it. Moving across galaxies is hard. But if you could leap forward in time, maybe even billions of years, you wouldn't need to cross space at all. You just wait for civilizations to develop, evolve, collapse, and then peek in when something interesting finally happens. But what if they peaked already and decided Earth wasn't worth sticking around for? Mainstream astrophysics still leans toward more grounded explanations, like the possibility that alien civilizations are rare, short-lived, or simply uninterested in chatting. Maybe they're using signals we can't detect, or maybe they're too far away to notice us yet. Maybe we're just early to the party, and the rest of the universe is still picking out outfits. But let's get weird. What if time tourists, alien time tourists, came by in Earth's past, left behind some mysterious architecture, some awkward stone monoliths, some crop circles? What if they did make contact, but we weren't home, because it was still the Cambrian explosion and everything on Earth looked like seafood? Here's a quirky cosmic nugget. Some versions of the Fermi paradox suggest that we're intentionally being avoided. The zoo hypothesis proposes that Earth is under observation, but we're not allowed to know. Like some kind of cosmic wildlife documentary, here we see the humans developing TikTok and arguing about sandwiches. Best not to disturb them. But what if it's not just about space? What if the aliens came and left? Scientists still argue whether time travel is a technology that's inherently isolating. If a species could skip forward millions of years, what would they even want from us? Our Netflix passwords, our memes, our philosophical musings on why hot dogs are called that. You lie back in the desert sand. The stars look suspiciously like punctuation marks, dashes, dots, commas, a pause in a sentence you don't understand. Maybe they're not just stars. Maybe they're data, messages, breadcrumbs from civilizations that stopped by, checked their intergalactic Yelp rating, and moved on. And here's a sleepy twist for your brain to nibble on. What if we are the aliens? Time-shifted descendants from a forgotten future who forgot to bring their passports and now think they've always been here. Maybe humanity is a temporal echo, a remix of something older and wiser that came back too far and had to start over. So tonight, as you drift, remember, silence isn't the absence of life. It might be the pause between time sentences. Maybe the aliens are watching, or waiting, or remembering us from a future they already lived. Or maybe they left a message under your bed right next to the dust bunnies and that one lost sock. Either way, sleep well. The sky is listening. You rise from the desert floor and step through a shimmer in the air, like walking through an invisible curtain of static. On the other side, it's strangely familiar. Your childhood bedroom, the same glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the same posters, but your laptop is way too advanced. Your reflection looks edited, and outside the window, everything's made of polygons. Welcome to simulated time travel, the VR trap, where your journey to the past might just be a highly detailed cheat code. The idea is simple and unsettling. What if we think we're traveling through time, but we're not? What if we're just inside an ultra-realistic simulation, perfectly recreating the past? The smells, the sounds, the awkward conversations, it's all there. But it's not real, not exactly. This isn't just sci-fi anymore. With advances in artificial intelligence, neural mapping, and full sensory immersion, the day is coming when someone could strap on a headset and walk through ancient Rome, or Victorian London, or Tuesday. And here's the catch. What if the simulation is so good, you forget it's a simulation? Mainstream scientists already play with this idea, not just as entertainment, but as a way to test history itself. Virtual reconstructions of ancient cities are helping archaeologists understand how structures were used, how crowds moved, even how people may have spoken. But what if we went further? What if future historians could load a particular year and drop themselves into the simulation? Or, creepier still, what if that's what you're doing right now? A quirky twist for you. Some physicists propose we might already be in a simulation, and glitches like déjà vu, Mandela effects, or that time you swear your keys moved on their own, are tiny signs of system updates, or corrections, like the universe debugging itself around you. Classic software energy. Now add time travel to this mix, and things get existential quickly. You go back to 1863, thinking you've traveled physically. You meet people, make choices, but you never left your time. Your brain just interfaced with a full sensory, quantum fidelity reconstruction. The choices you make don't affect the real timeline because you're not in it. You're watching an interactive replay. But here's the paradox. If the simulation is indistinguishable from reality, and if your choices still teach you, change you, maybe even haunt you, does it matter? Scientists still argue whether consciousness would respond the same way inside simulations, especially ones that reflect personal memories or historical events that shouldn't know you're there. Can simulations adapt? Could a character become self-aware, glitch, and realize you're out of place? Or, worse, follow you back? You open your laptop. On the screen is a folder called Past Lives. Inside, videos, photos, snapshots of moments you don't remember living, a dinner table in 1960, a street corner in 2104, a birthday party where everyone's wearing vintage space helmets and calling you captain. Your heart thumps in that slow, VR quarter hiccup kind of way. Is this a memory, a dream, or a file someone left for you? And now the scariest twist. What if you go back to the past through simulation and never find your way out? Not because you're trapped, but because you don't want to leave. Because it feels more real than the future you came from. So here's your pillow-soft pondering tonight. Is time travel always physical? Or is it mental, emotional? A form of remembrance so vivid it becomes a temporary truth. Maybe you're already time traveling every time you dream. Maybe that's why some dreams feel real enough to miss the next morning. Maybe time doesn't care how you get there, only that you do. So lie back, close your eyes, boot up the past, and remember, if someone in your dream knows your name before you tell them, you might already be in the next simulation. You wake up strapped into a chair, slowly spinning near the edge of a glowing abyss. It's not terrifying, more like floating in molasses next to a lava lamp the size of a moon. Outside your window, stars stretch like melted candle wax, bending toward a swirling black vortex. You sip something lukewarm from a pouch labeled caffeine, Extreme Edition. Welcome to time dilation at the Black Hole Cafe, where lunch might take 5 minutes for you, but everyone you know is already retired. You're hovering just outside the event horizon of a black hole, the point where gravity becomes so intense that not even light can escape. But you're in the safe zone, orbiting just far enough away to be fine. Ish. Now here's where things get mind-bendy. According to Einstein's general relativity, the closer you get to a massive object, the more time slows down for you relative to someone farther away. It's called gravitational time dilation. And black holes, they're the heavyweight champions of mass. So let's say you spend 1 hour sipping space coffee, watching gravity do its dance. Meanwhile, back on Earth, years pass. People change. Governments rise and fall. Your favorite band breaks up, reunites, breaks up again. By the time you return, the world has moved on, and you haven't even finished your sandwich. This isn't just theory. We've confirmed it experimentally. Atomic clocks flown around Earth or placed at different altitudes tick at slightly different rates. Not much, but enough to prove that time is not a universal constant. It stretches and compresses like the waistband on an old pair of sweatpants. Here's your quirky tidbit for today's snack. If you could hover right at the edge of a black hole's event horizon and somehow not get spaghettified by tidal forces, you could literally watch the future unfold in fast forward. In theory, you could wait a few hours and see thousands of years fly by. Weddings, wars, whatever Elon Musk does next. You'd be the ultimate voyeur of tomorrow. But scientists still argue whether you could ever leave such a position. Getting out would require ridiculous amounts of energy, not to mention emotional stamina. Plus, your bones might hate you for it. And then there's the communication lag. Imagine trying to call home. You say, "Hey, I'll be back soon." By the time your message arrives, everyone you know has already moved, aged, and probably changed their number. So what does this mean for time travel? Well, technically, it's one-way time travel. You're not going to the past, but you're leaping forward into the future by slowing your own timeline down. You could even design a system where astronauts orbit a black hole to return home centuries later with barely a wrinkle, although they'd need a serious crash course on new slang. You look out the window again. Light spirals into darkness like cosmic frosting. You wonder how long you've been here. Your watch says 5 minutes. The ship's clock says 20 years. Somewhere, a message from someone you loved is blinking on the monitor. You missed it. By the time you answer, they'll be gone. And here's the bedtime brain melt. What if you didn't stumble into this black hole cafe by accident? What if this was a choice? A way to skip forward, dodge some pain, miss some chaos, and let the universe sort itself out before you rejoin it? Would you do it? Would you leave everything and everyone behind just to see what's next? Or maybe you already did. So curl into your pillow tonight with this in your orbiting thoughts. Time isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, a slingshot, a coil. And somewhere near the edge of gravity, you might just find yourself sipping cold coffee, watching history catch up to your heart. The black hole fades, and you're back on solid ground. But everything's just slightly wrong. The sky has a strange tint. The buildings look like neo-classical fever dreams, and the Eiffel Tower has a blinking Wi-Fi router bolted to the top. You glance around and spot a guy in a powdered wig, scrolling through a smartphone. Welcome to Napoleon with a smartphone, where inserting one piece of future tech into the past could shatter history like a dropped iPad. You're now standing in Paris, 1805. Napoleon Bonaparte is mid-speech to a gathered crowd of soldiers. You, for reasons known only to your poorly supervised time travel ethics committee, hand him a fully charged smartphone. He raises an eyebrow, touches the screen, and within minutes, he's discovered memes, GPS, encrypted messaging, and, oops, the recipe for chemical weapons. Nice going. This is the paradox of anachronistic insertion, a fancy term for what happens when something from the future appears in a time that's not ready for it. The ripple effects aren't subtle, they're catastrophic. Give fire to the Stone Age? Civilization. Give nuclear codes to Napoleon? Alternative civilization. With fewer holidays. Mainstream historians call this the disruption cascade. Technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's embedded in systems, economies, politics, infrastructure. Give the past a phone, and they can't use it unless they also invent satellites, wireless networks, and privacy policies. But once they do, they skip centuries of development, skipping entire struggles, revolutions, and context. And that's the danger. Skip the journey, lose the wisdom. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. There's an actual science fiction subgenre dedicated to this scenario, called technological displacement. In one famous novel, a time traveler gives a medieval knight access to modern weapons and trains him, like a one-man army. Spoiler: things go about as well as you'd expect for the other knights. Scientists still argue whether dropping a single piece of advanced tech in the past could really cause a total timeline rewrite. Some argue that without the ecosystem to support it, the tech becomes useless. A smartphone with no internet is just a very smug mirror. Others suggest that even understanding the tech might be enough to leapfrog entire centuries of progress. You watch as Napoleon taps away on his new phone. He's already figured out predictive text, started a group chat with 3 Prussian generals, and is dangerously close to discovering cryptocurrency. The French Revolution could be undone with a few tweets and a viral TikTok featuring baguette choreography. You tried to take the phone back, but it's too late. He swiped right on history, and now the past is rewriting itself in real time. But here's the deeper paradox. What if that's how we got here? What if every major burst of progress, fire, math, agriculture, pizza bagels, was the result of someone or something dropping a little gift too early? What if time travelers have been meddling all along, and we're just the leftovers of their best, or worst, guesses? As you retreat down a cobblestone alley, history begins to shimmer. Horse-drawn carriages now hover. Corsets come with USB ports. A marching band plays Daft Punk on brass instruments. So let this paradox tuck you in tonight. The past is fragile. One wrong gift, one piece of future candy handed out too soon, and the timeline develops a serious sweet tooth. And maybe, just maybe, you've already held an object that didn't belong in your time. A clock that ticked too smoothly. A song you swear you heard before it was released. A photo with someone who looks suspiciously like you, in the 1800s. Sleep well, time smuggler. Just don't leave anything behind. You slip out of the alley and straight into a modern kitchen, where coffee mugs hover mid-pour, and steam curls upward, then downward, then sideways. One mug shatters on the tile before it hits the ground. Your eyes dart to the clock. It's counting down, but the numbers are increasing. Welcome to backward causality, coffee before the brew, where the effect happens before the cause. And your morning routine just failed a logic test. Here's the deal. Backward causality suggests that future events can influence the past. Not metaphorically, not with a wink and a nod, but literally. Like time has flipped its power dynamic and decided to let the consequences go first. Let's imagine a coffee machine that brews a cup only if it detects the coffee already being drunk. You walk into the kitchen, reach for your mug, and only then does the machine kick on. No trigger, no button press. Just thirsty you somehow reaching back through time and giving the machine a cosmic thumbs up. Sound impossible? Maybe. But welcome to quantum mechanics, where logic goes on vacation. In mainstream physics, time usually flows from past to future. Cause, then effect. You press the button, then get your coffee. You trip, then fall. You text your crush, then feel regret. But some interpretations of quantum theory, especially those involving retrocausality, suggest that particles don't always follow that order. Enter the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. A particle's behavior in the past can appear to change depending on whether it's observed in the future. The act of measurement retroactively decides what happened earlier. It's like watching a movie where the ending rewrites the opening scene. Spooky, right? Here's your quirky twist. In some versions of this paradox, messages could theoretically be sent backward in time using quantum entanglement, but only messages of pure randomness. Imagine getting a note that just says, asparagus. Is it from the future? A prank? Or just dinner plans? Scientists still argue whether this is a real feature of the universe or just a glitch in how we interpret quantum probabilities. Some say it's all an illusion, that events only look retrocausal because we don't fully understand the timeline's underlying math. Others think the universe is way less linear than we hoped, and time's arrow may be more like a boomerang. You look at the counter again. The sugar is pouring back into the spoon. The mug pieces are rising and reassembling like a sad Pixar short. And suddenly, You remember dropping your phone this morning, except now it's already fixed, sitting right where you didn't leave it. And here's the soft, eerie thought to float you into sleep. What if backward causality isn't rare? What if it happens all the time, but on scales too subtle to notice? A feeling of dread before a real event, a dream that seems to warn you, a word you almost say before the conversation unfolds to make it feel pre-chosen. Maybe you've already been shaped by your future. Maybe tonight's dream will ripple backward and change what you think when you wake up. Maybe the version of you lying in bed right now is already reacting to tomorrow's decisions. And maybe the coffee is already brewed. So close your eyes. Don't worry if the next thought you have feels borrowed. It probably is. The kitchen dissolves into a swirl of numbers, symbols, and spinning diagrams. You're now floating in a dark, data-rich void where gravity hums like a dial-up modem, and every thought seems to echo with equations. In front of you, a shimmering black sphere, radiating information like heat. A voice, mechanical, gentle, whispers, "Welcome to the Paradox Vault." You've arrived at the information paradox, lost and found, where black holes devour data and physics freaks out trying to get it back. Let's start with the problem. When something falls into a black hole, it's gone, like really gone. A sock in the laundry gone. I swear I saved that file gone. According to classic general relativity, all matter and information that crosses the event horizon is lost forever, squashed into oblivion, never to be seen again. But that creates a serious problem, because in quantum mechanics, information can't be destroyed, like ever. That's one of its most sacred rules. Even when atoms break apart or particles vanish in a puff of whatever, the data, the who, what, and how of the process must still exist, somewhere. This mismatch between two major pillars of physics led to one of the messiest academic fistfights in modern science. The black hole information paradox. Mainstream physicists, including Stephen Hawking, who helped define the problem, originally believed black holes delete information completely. Later, Hawking himself changed his stance, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, information leaks back out through subtle quantum radiation over time. This radiation is called Hawking radiation, and it's basically the black hole's very slow, very awkward way of sweating out data, like a cosmic apology letter. But we still don't know how it works. Here's your quirky cosmic side note. Some theorists believe that the surface of a black hole, the event horizon, actually stores a holographic imprint of everything it swallowed, like a massive cosmic USB drive with no eject button. This idea ties into the holographic principle, which suggests that the entire universe might be like a 3D projection of 2D data. If true, your whole life might just be a really elaborate flipbook on the edge of a black hole. No pressure. Scientists still argue whether black holes truly erase information or just scramble it beyond recognition. If they do destroy it, that would break quantum theory. If they don't, then we need to revise how gravity and spacetime interact at the most extreme limits. You stare into the black sphere. For a moment, it reflects your own face, but made entirely of glowing binary. You watch a version of yourself fall inward, pixelating at the edges, disassembling like a puzzle in reverse. You try to follow, but a strange force holds you back. Then, a tiny scrap of something flutters out of the void. A photo of you, standing somewhere you haven't been yet, holding something that hasn't been invented. So here's your sleepy paradox for the night. What if black holes aren't just cosmic vacuums? What if they're vaults, or better yet, time capsules? What if everything they swallow gets stored, sorted, and slowly whispered back out into the universe, including the information that makes you? Maybe every black hole is just the universe writing itself a letter it hasn't read yet. And maybe, just maybe, you're part of that letter. So drift easy, data spec. The universe is still buffering. You drift upward from the black sphere as though weightless. Then down again into a small, cluttered laboratory, lit by flickering halogen bulbs. Wires snake across the floor. Whiteboards are scrawled with equations that seem to erase and rewrite themselves. And in the center of it all stands a glowing metal box, slightly humming. On top, a sign that reads, "Do not observe." Welcome to Schrödinger's time machine, where you both travel and don't, until someone watches. You might already be familiar with Schrödinger's cat. Classic setup. A cat is placed in a sealed box with a device that has a 50% chance of releasing poison, based on a quantum event. Until you open the box, the cat is technically both alive and dead. A quantum superposition. It's not a cruel metaphor. It's just how quantum mechanics likes to ruin dinner. Now apply that same logic to time travel. The idea here is that a person, or a particle, enters a time machine, and until an external observer confirms whether they arrive in the past or not, they exist in a quantum blur. They both did and didn't time travel. The timeline remains in flux until measured. You become a walking paradox, Schrödinger's Traveler, flickering across centuries like a light bulb in a haunted house. Mainstream physics generally keep superposition confined to tiny particles, but some interpretations, like the many worlds hypothesis, suggest the principle could scale up. In that view, if you time travel, the universe forks. In one, you arrive. In another, you don't. And from the outside, you're a statistical smudge until someone collapses your timeline by asking, did they make it? Here's your quirky paradox snack for the night. One scientist once speculated that if time travel were real, we might never observe it because observation collapses the possibility. So maybe people do travel through time. But the moment we look, reality chooses the version where they didn't. Time travel might be like a cosmic prank, always happening, but never caught. Scientists still argue whether this is philosophy disguised as physics, or just quantum weirdness trying to moonlight as science fiction. Some insist quantum superposition only applies to particles, not humans. Others? They point to experiments where atoms seem to retroactively choose how they behaved based on future decisions. And they whisper, what if we're just very large particles? You glance at the glowing box. It pulses slightly faster now. There's a chair inside and a countdown reading. 3, 2, 1, then a flicker and nothing. You peer inside. Empty. Or was it? A nearby monitor replays footage. A figure appears in the box, just for a split second. You freeze the frame. It's you. But you don't remember getting in. The screen glitches, then resets. The chair is still there, still waiting. Here's where the paradox curls into your brain like a sleepy cat. What if the only thing stopping your time travel is your own awareness? What if the moment you believe too hard, the universe picks a version where you stayed still? Or, more wild, what if you already did time travel, and your memories just haven't caught up yet? Maybe last week you disappeared for 2 hours. Maybe tonight you'll close your eyes and wake up in 1492 or 3050. Maybe you're mid-jump right now, and this bedtime story is your mental anchor. So sleep soft, quantum traveler. Don't think too hard. Don't try to remember, because if no one observes your timeline, who's to say you're not already gone? You step away from the glowing time machine and find yourself in a cavernous garage, lit by strings of exposed bulbs and the faint glow of something impossible. In the center of the room, nestled between a dusty recliner and a suspiciously labeled mini-fridge, stands a metallic archway humming with potential. At its base, two circles connected by flickering tendrils of light. One end glows blue, the other red. Welcome to wormholes and the IKEA time maze, where shortcuts through space-time exist, if you can figure out where to put the screws. A wormhole, sometimes called an Einstein-Rosen bridge, is a theoretical tunnel connecting two distant points in space-time. Think of it like folding a piece of paper so two dots touch. Now poke a hole through. That's your wormhole. You're not traveling faster than light. You're just skipping the line entirely. And if one end is in the past and the other in the future, boom, instant time portal. No tolls, no lines, just physics with an attitude. Mainstream physics allows for wormholes in the math. They're solutions to Einstein's field equations, but that doesn't mean they're real. For one, you'd need something called exotic matter to keep the tunnel open. That's matter with negative energy density, the kind of stuff that probably exists only in theory, or in that one drawer in your house that eats pens and lighters. And if you could build one, the paradoxes would multiply faster than IKEA parts without instructions. For example, say you drop a wrench through the wormhole. It appears on the other side 5 minutes before you dropped it. You use that wrench to fix the wormhole, but now you never had to drop it in the first place. So, who invented the wrench? That's the bootstrap paradox again. Only now it's wearing a tool belt and threatening to void your warranty on reality. Here's your quirky tidbit. In one thought experiment, a scientist proposed sending a message through a wormhole from the future to warn their past self not to build the wormhole. The result? An eternal loop of indecision, confusion, and a lot of paper wasted on apology notes to the fabric of space-time. Scientists still argue whether wormholes could ever be stable enough to use, let alone navigate. Some believe they'd collapse instantly. Others think quantum effects might stabilize them. A few even suggest wormholes could exist naturally, hiding inside black holes or the weird places between quantum particles, like cosmic rabbit holes you didn't mean to fall into. You approach the archway. There's a handwritten sign taped to it. Caution. Enter only if emotionally prepared to meet yourself. Next to it, an instruction manual written in 27 languages, none of them yours. You lean in. Through the tunnel, you see a coffee shop, same as the one you visited this morning. But the newspaper headline on the counter says, April 3rd, 2049, and your face on the front page. You're holding a trophy, or possibly a cat. The archway hums louder now, and here's the sleepy twist. What if wormholes are real, but only stable for a few seconds at a time? What if you've already passed through one, on a plane, in a dream, in a moment that felt out of order? A memory that didn't belong to you. A future déjà vu sneaking in early. So tonight, as you lie there, drifting deeper into the folds of time and pillow, remember, the universe may already be riddled with shortcuts. Little folds, little gaps, little traps. But if you ever find yourself staring through a glowing arch at your own future, bring a wrench. You'll probably need it. The garage flickers and vanishes. You're now walking through a grand ballroom, but it's decaying. Chandeliers drip wax backward. Champagne flows up into bottles, and footprints on the dusty floor erase themselves as you step forward. Everything is in motion, in reverse. Welcome to Entropy, the party pooper of time, where no matter how clever your time tricks are, the universe demands disorder. Entropy is the engine behind time's relentless march. It's not glamorous, but it's boss-level fundamental. In simple terms, entropy is the measure of disorder in a system. Over time, things naturally go from order to chaos. Ice melts, batteries die, sandwiches fall jelly side down. That's entropy doing its very passive-aggressive thing. Now apply that to time travel. If you go back in time, even for a harmless little joyride, you're fighting the flow of entropy. You're trying to reverse a process that every atom in the universe has voted against. And entropy? It doesn't negotiate. According to mainstream thermodynamics, the second law insists entropy in a closed system never decreases. The more you do, the more disorder you leave behind. And in time travel terms, this means that trying to move backward through time is like rewinding a broken record that refuses to unbreak. Here's the quirky kicker. Imagine you build a perfect time machine. You zap back 10 minutes, looking flawless, but your molecules remember. Your brain chemistry is slightly out of sync. Your skin cells have lost entropy in a way that doesn't line up with the environment. You're like a glass of hot tea showing up in an ice bath. It makes no sense thermodynamically, and the universe stares at you like you just farted in church. Scientists still argue whether entropy is truly the cause of time's direction, or just a symptom. Some believe time moves forward because entropy increases. Others think entropy just piggybacks on whatever direction time happens to be going. It's the chicken or thermodynamic egg debate, and no one has cracked it. You pass a banquet table where the candles are unburning, wicks regrowing, wax climbing back into place like sad, reverse icicles. Champagne bubbles reabsorb. Forks unclink. Laughter reels back into closed mouths. A moment ago you spilled water. Now the glass reassembles itself mid-air. It's beautiful. It's eerie. It's deeply illegal, thermodynamically speaking. And here's where it gets really weird. If you could reverse entropy completely, you wouldn't just unage. You'd unremember. Thoughts would zip backward into storage. Words would unspeak themselves. Dreams would tuck themselves neatly into your subconscious and vanish. You wouldn't just visit the past. You'd become the past. That's the cruel trick. You can't truly go backward unless you surrender everything that made you now. Your memories, your scars. That one inside joke that still makes you laugh for no reason. So maybe that's why we don't time travel. Not because we can't, but because doing it right means giving up everything forward motion gave us. You sit on a velvet bench as dust particles rise upward around you like glitter in reverse. A clock on the wall ticks, but the hands spin counterclockwise. You try to breathe normally, but the air feels denser now. Heavy with potential, thicker with consequence. And yet, entropy continues. So here's the thought to drift with tonight. Time doesn't hate you. It just has a plan. And that plan is messiness. Spilled milk, lost socks, faded memories. But also growth, change, music. You can't have jazz without entropy, or cookies, or plot twists. So let the ballroom fade. Let the candles unburn. Let entropy do its thing. After all, what fun is time if everything stays neat? You blink, and the ballroom unravels like paper in reverse, folding into a hallway of mirrors that stretches endlessly in both directions. But something's wrong. You move forward, and your reflection moves backward, then, weirdly, sideways. Each mirror shows a different version of you. Some smile, some scowl, one waves before you do. Welcome to retrocausality, cause after effect, where the future doesn't just influence the present, it creates it. Retrocausality flips your favorite rule on its head. That cause always precedes effect. Here, the effect might actually come first, sneaking into the past like a mischievous time traveler trying to rewrite history before it's written. You reach toward one mirror, and your reflection flinches, as if it knew you were going to touch it. Another mirror shows you holding something you haven't picked up yet. And down the hall, a version of you is walking away, mouthing words you're just about to say. This isn't just sci-fi wizardry. It's a legit quantum idea. In mainstream quantum mechanics, there's a principle called time symmetry. Many of the fundamental laws of physics don't actually care what direction time flows. The math works both ways, and in some interpretations, like the two-state vector formalism, a particle's present state is influenced not just by its past, but also by its future. Yep, the future sends signals, quietly, subtly, as if time itself is texting backward in all caps. Hey, don't do that. Here's your quirky paradox moment. In one version of the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, the outcome of a measurement appears to influence the behavior of a particle before the measurement is even made. It's like placing a bet after the horse race and still winning, and then retroactively becoming the one who trained the horse. Scientists still argue whether retrocausality is a real phenomenon or just a weird mathematical illusion. The probabilities are so slippery, so precise, that it's hard to tell if we're seeing backward causation or just making really lucky guesses with quantum dice. But what if it's not just particles? What if your brain is wired to receive faint echoes from the future? What if intuition, déjà vu, or those gut feelings that seem unjustified are your consciousness catching ghost signals from events that haven't happened yet? Maybe that weird sense you shouldn't get on that elevator is because some version of you did and the timeline didn't like it. You move deeper into the mirror hall. The reflections grow sharper. One of them shows you walking into a coffee shop tomorrow. Another shows you hugging someone you haven't met. A third one shows nothing, just a blank mirror. That one makes your spine itch. And here's where the paradox tightens its grip. If your future can influence your present, how much of your life is actually yours? Are you making choices or following echoes? If you suddenly change your mind now, does the future get rewritten? Or are you meant to change your mind because the future already told you to? It's like a loop made of whispers and nudges, like the universe leaving breadcrumbs from tomorrow. So here's your dreamy riddle tonight. What if some part of you, just a sliver, is already out there? A step ahead, waiting, sending signals back, and every time you choose right, it exhales in relief. Every time you hesitate, it gently nudges your thoughts. It doesn't scream, it doesn't interfere, it just suggests. And if that's true, then you're not alone in your timeline. You're being guided by you. So sleep gently, soft traveler. Trust your instincts. The future's been rooting for you all along. You stumble out of the mirror hall into a glowing tunnel. It feels like walking inside a fiber optic cable. Light pulses in slow waves. Cool air brushes your skin, and your footsteps echo in two directions at once, forward and back. A soft voice greets you, neutral and amused. This timeline is Novikov compliant. Welcome to the Novikov self-consistency principle, where time travel is allowed, as long as you don't get any funny ideas about changing the past. This principle, introduced by physicist Igor Novikov in the 1980s, proposes a bold fix for the tangle of time travel paradoxes. You can go back in time, but you can't change anything in a way that would create a contradiction. Whatever you do in the past must have always been part of history, which means, sorry, you're not saving Lincoln, or high-fiving cavemen, or inventing jazz in the Renaissance. If you drop a banana peel in 1902, it was already there. You just didn't know it until you went back and dropped it. It's like time is a very strict librarian. You may browse, but you may not rearrange. Mainstream physics doesn't require the Novikov principle, but it's one of the most elegant ways to make time travel fit without unraveling reality. It smooths out paradoxes like the grandfather one. If you try to prevent your birth by interfering with your grandparents, something will always stop you. A missed train, a locked door, a goose. The universe gently but firmly says no. Here's your quirky twist. Some theoretical scenarios using wormholes or closed time-like curves suggest that even if you try to create a paradox, quantum mechanics will tweak things just enough to stop you. You trip, but the gun misfires. You call out, but no one hears. You shout into history, and it responds with a polite shrug. Scientists still argue whether this kind of constraint is baked into reality, or just wishful thinking by physicists who don't like chaos. Some argue it violates free will. Others say it protects causality, like a cosmic insurance policy. Still others think time just doesn't care that much, and we're all giving it way too much credit. You reach the center of the tunnel, and there's a small screen showing a security feed from 30 minutes ago. You're on it, walking down this exact hallway, adjusting your sleeve. And in your hand, a note. You don't remember writing a note, and yet, your sleeve feels crinkled. You reach in. There it is. A folded slip of paper in your handwriting, dated an hour from now. You already chose just walk. And suddenly it hits you. Maybe every strange moment of your life, every weird coincidence, every decision you thought was spontaneous, wasn't. Maybe you've already made all the choices you'll ever make. You're just catching up. That sounds terrifying, until it starts to feel comforting, like realizing the road has already been paved. All you have to do is walk it. Here's the soft wraparound. The Novikov principle doesn't stop time travel. It just changes its flavor. You're not rewriting history. You're fulfilling it. You're the reason the mystery happened. You're the knock at the door, the name on the letter, the shadow in the photo. So tonight, if you dream of traveling back, don't panic if things feel familiar. That's just you doing what you already did. Because this loop, it likes you. It's always had your name on it. You exit the fiber optic tunnel and step into a train station that feels off. The air is hushed, too quiet for such a grand place. The departure board above flickers with destinations like Last Thursday, 1987, alternate, and slightly later. But none of the platforms are busy. No lines, no time tourists posing for selfies in ancient robes or hover boots. Welcome to the time tourist's dilemma, where the biggest question isn't can we time travel? It's why hasn't anyone visited us already? You wander past a row of souvenir shops, little clocks in bottles, t-shirts that say, I broke causality and all I got was this paradox. A machine in the corner prints fake timelines for $1. You insert a coin, and it spits out a receipt labeled, Your Life Without Wi-Fi. It's terrifying. The real mystery here is a version of the Fermi paradox, but with a twist. If time travel will one day be possible, even just once, then why haven't we met any time travelers? No tourists from the year 5000. No whispers of someone dropping a smartwatch in the Middle Ages. Not even a single photobomb in historical paintings. So what gives? Mainstream thinkers suggest a few reasons. Maybe time travel is flat out impossible. Maybe it's restricted to information only, messages, not people. Or maybe there's a limit. You can't travel back to a time before the first time machine was created. No machine, no target. That would mean we're still waiting for the starting bell. But the quirky, delicious theory, time travelers exist. They just don't want to deal with us. Think about it. Would you go back to 2020, to the age of traffic, trolls, and phones that randomly update overnight? Maybe time tourists skip our era entirely. Too unstable, too unpredictable, too much banana bread. Some theorists suggest that time travel comes with a strict non-interference policy. Think temporal prime directive. Look, but don't touch. Or perhaps they're here, but disguised, hiding in plain sight as background characters. That weird guy at the library who always reads upside down, possibly from 2619. That barista who spells your name Jexins, definitely not from around here. Scientists still argue whether this absence of evidence is evidence of absence, or just another puzzle we haven't figured out yet. Maybe time tourists don't use visible machines. Maybe they travel by consciousness. Or maybe they erase their own footprints so perfectly we can't even tell they were here. You pause at a departure platform marked local time only. A voice on the intercom calls for passengers heading to the day after you said that thing you regret. No one boards. You stay seated. A travel guide floats by, open to a page titled Responsible Tourism in Pre-Stable Temporal Zones. The first line reads, "Try not to ruin anything permanently." Here's the twist to sleep on. What if there is a whole network of time travelers, and they've simply agreed not to visit us? Maybe we're quarantined, or protected, or being watched to see what kind of future we build before they let us join the timeline party. Maybe we're the last culture in history that still thinks time is linear. The kids from the past, building sandcastles, unaware there's an ocean of timelines just offshore. So as you drift off tonight, remember, silence doesn't mean no one's there. It might just mean someone's being polite. And if you do meet someone who claims to be from the future, ask them about socks. That's always the giveaway. You board the next train without thinking. The interior is sleek, the windows are dark, and instead of a conductor, there's a softly glowing touchscreen asking, which version of reality would you like to continue in? You hesitate. The options scroll endlessly. Same but happier. More cats. No Brussels sprouts. Universe 27b. Welcome to parallel universes and the split infinity latte, where every change you make spawns a new reality, and your coffee order might collapse a timeline. This is the multiverse theory, a favorite playground for anyone who's ever said, "What if?" According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every decision creates a split. Every quantum event, no matter how small, branches the universe into different paths. One where you turn left, one where you said yes, one where you went to bed early and became a billionaire. Whoops. Now apply that to time travel. You go back in time and step on a flower. You think, oops, minor aesthetic crime. But instead of breaking causality, the universe simply says, fine, and forks itself. In your new branch, that flower was never there. A bee lands somewhere else. Pollination patterns shift. Climate tweaks slightly. Fast forward 1,000 years. Sentient cacti rule the world. This solves a lot of paradoxes. Kill your grandfather? No problem. You just created a timeline where you never exist, but you still do, in the one you came from. Clean, elegant, and slightly horrifying. Mainstream physics doesn't officially confirm the multiverse, but many scientists accept it as a valid interpretation. It keeps quantum math tidy and avoids the weirdness of particles being both here and there, unless observed. In the multiverse, they are both, just in different timelines. Here's your quirky nugget for tonight. A physicist once joked that your lost socks don't disappear. They just quantum leap into a parallel universe where your dryer is worshipped as a portal god. And that version of you probably has warm feet and a mild sock addiction. Scientists still argue whether these universes can interact or remain permanently sealed off. Could you hop from one to another? Leave messages for yourself? Start a podcast in a world where dinosaurs never went extinct? You look out the train window. There's a brief flicker, your own reflection staring back at you. But different. Different haircut. Different eyes. They mouth a word you don't recognize. Then they're gone. The screen in front of you buzzes. Warning, current path deviates from baseline. You take a sip of your coffee. Wait, vanilla instead of mocha. You didn't order that, or maybe you did, in this version. And now, here you are, sipping a latte that shouldn't exist, riding a train between realities, wondering if you're the original you, or just one of a trillion backups. Here's where the paradox curls up like a sleepy cat on your chest. If every decision spawns a new universe, then somewhere out there is a version of you who didn't say what you regret, who chased the thing you hesitated on, who bought the better couch. And the question becomes, does that make you free or irrelevant? So tonight, as you settle into your favorite version of your bed, remember, the multiverse doesn't judge. It just branches. It holds every version of you, good, bad, weirdly obsessed with raccoons, and loves them equally. And if you dream tonight of another life, another self, another choice, that wasn't imagination, that was a peek. You step off the train into a room made entirely of glowing glass panels. Above you, lasers dance like hyperactive lightning bugs. In the center of the space stands a single table with one button, one laser, and one particle ready to misbehave. A speaker crackles to life. Prepare for quantum nonsense. Welcome to the quantum eraser experiment. Unseeing reality, where observing something can rewrite the past, and forgetting can stitch it back together. This paradox doesn't rely on wormholes or dramatic time loops. It's subtler, stranger, ruder. Imagine firing a single photon, just one particle of light, at a barrier with two slits. The photon seems to go through both slits at once, creating an interference pattern on a screen behind it. Wave-like behavior, even though it's a particle. Classic quantum party trick. But here's the twist. If you measure which slit the photon actually goes through, the interference disappears. The photon chooses a path. The wave-like behavior collapses. You catch it in the act, and it suddenly behaves like it's being watched by its grandma. Now for the truly spicy part. In the delayed choice quantum eraser, you make the decision after the photon has already hit the screen. And somehow, that future choice seems to influence its past behavior, as if it was waiting to see whether you'd pay attention, as if reality itself is playing peekaboo with the truth. Mainstream physics accepts this phenomenon, not as science fiction, but as experimentally verified quantum behavior. It doesn't mean you can send messages to the past or rewrite history with your thoughts, but it does mean reality doesn't fully commit until it's forced to. Which, to be fair, is relatable. Here's your quirky bedtime twist. One researcher once compared the quantum eraser to writing a story, then shredding half of it, only to find the original ending has now changed to match the version you forgot. Which begs the question, how many of your memories were retroactively edited after you stopped paying attention? Scientists still argue whether this means time is nonlinear at the quantum level, or whether we just don't understand measurement yet. Some believe each quantum event splits the universe, again invoking that multiverse idea. Others believe it's not the universe that splits, but you, your awareness riding whatever thread your observations sew together. You walk toward the table. The button in front of you reads, "Erase observation." You hesitate. The particle has already hit the screen. But if you erase the data, it's as if you never saw it. The pattern reappears. The photon undoes its commitment, not in your memory, but in its own past. And here's the sleepy riddle to curl up with. If reality waits to be seen, then who's to say it exists at all when unobserved? Maybe the past is just an unfinished sentence, rewritten every time you turn your head. Maybe you're not watching the world, but co-authoring it, and the more you forget, the more it changes. So tonight, as you let your thoughts drift into the blur of unawareness, remember, not all paradoxes are loud. Some tiptoe in socks. Some happen only in the space between your attention and your imagination. And some, like this one, only exist when you try to forget them. You leave the glass-paneled lab and step onto a rocky hillside under a twilight sky. The wind carries whispers that sound like blueprints. Beneath your feet, scattered debris, bones, not old, but not entirely. Born. You kneel beside one, brushing away the dust. It's wearing a smartwatch from 2042. Welcome to future archaeology. Ruins of tomorrow, where the past is still being excavated. And sometimes, what we find hasn't happened yet. You're standing in a dig site, but nothing here makes sense. A melted iPhone next to a Babylonian-style tablet, a half-buried vending machine offering snacks from the year 2097. A graffiti tag on a stone wall reads, "We tried, us." And that's when you notice the dig team is gone. Only you remain, knee-deep in evidence of events still ahead. This is the paradox of temporal stratification. The idea that artifacts from the future can appear in the present. Whether they were sent intentionally, lost accidentally, or stumbled into the wrong year during a very chaotic weekend, they create confusion for anyone trying to write a linear story about time. Mainstream science doesn't confirm future archaeology as real, of course, but theoretical models involving wormholes, black hole event horizons, or time-looped particles don't rule it out either. In certain simulations, information or objects might fall backward through space-time, like a coin tossed and caught before it leaves your hand. And here's your quirky bedtime dig nugget. There are actual archaeological mysteries that some people claim are future relics. Out-of-place artifacts, or parts, include things like gear-shaped rocks, apparent batteries in ancient tombs, or metal spheres found in 2-billion-year-old rock. Mainstream scholars say misinterpretation. Fringe thinkers say timeline contamination. Scientists still argue whether these so-called anachronisms are proof of time travel, parallel universes, or just humanity's uncanny knack for losing stuff in extremely inconvenient places. Some believe objects can slip through time via quantum fluctuations or space-time distortions, like socks, but with way more dramatic consequences. You walk deeper into the site. A half-collapsed monument bears a list of dates, ending in your birth year. There's a message engraved on metal. Please stop opening portals near residential zones. You wonder, if we're finding future relics, who buried them? Did we? Did future us leave a trail of breadcrumbs? Are we sending warnings backward through time, the way ancient cultures left cave paintings for us? What if that's what myths really are? Distorted reports of future tech seen through confused eyes. A god throwing thunder. Maybe a drone strike. A burning bush. Perhaps a malfunctioning hologram. The chariots of fire. Could be hovercraft. Could be nostalgia. Here's the paradox, folded gently into tonight's pillow. If the future leaves traces behind, is it still the future? And if we start to dig up what hasn't happened yet, can we change it? Or do we simply fulfill it, like actors uncovering a script we already agreed to perform? Maybe you were always meant to find that watch, that ruin, that half-sung lullaby someone from tomorrow buried beneath your bed. So tonight, sleep with a trowel by your side. Not because you're digging, but because you might be found. You walk past the excavation and into a dimly lit hangar, lined with cryopods that glow like enormous sleeping pills. Each one is labeled with a name, a date, and a question mark. You wipe the frost off one and see your own reflection staring back. Older, different, maybe smarter, maybe not. Welcome to temporal stowaways in deep sleep pods, where time travel isn't about jumping, just sleeping through the in-between. This is the long nap method of time travel. No paradoxes, no wormholes, no reality-melting contradictions. You simply climb into a pod, freeze yourself, and wait. The future arrives whether you move or not. It's like pressing fast forward on your own life, minus the snack breaks. This isn't science fiction anymore. Mainstream space agencies have already begun experimenting with short-term cryogenic sleep to help astronauts handle long journeys. One day, it could mean sleeping through a trip to Mars. But stretch that out. Years, centuries, and you've got yourself a very polite, very chilly version of time travel. Of course, that's just the start. The quirky twist? Some theories suggest that if deep sleep tech improves enough, people might deliberately stow themselves away for historical convenience. Miss a war, skip a recession, wake up when things finally make sense. Spoiler, they probably won't. But scientists still argue whether true stasis is possible. Your body may be frozen, but your brain, that's another story. What if your consciousness drifts while you sleep? What if dreams stretch across decades? What if you wake up knowing things you never lived? You walk between the pods. One opens slightly with a hiss. Inside, a person wearing clothes from 50 years in the future. Their eyes flutter beneath closed lids, as if watching a movie you're not allowed to see yet. The readout above them says, pending reintegration. Some believe the first humans to time travel won't be inventors, they'll be sleepers. Volunteers who climb into pods now, in the 2020s, hoping to wake up in 2150, to see new cities, new skies, new Wi-Fi speeds. But what they may find is a world with no memory of them, no place for their culture, their slang, or their memes. Just statues of people they've never heard of, and slang that sounds like encrypted hiccups. You pause in front of another pod. This one has no label. The interior looks familiar. There's a faint impression in the foam, like someone who looked a lot like you already took a nap here. Maybe they'll be back. Maybe they're still sleeping, somewhere farther down the timeline. And here's tonight's slow motion paradox. What happens to memory when you skip time like a stone across water? Do you stay you if you sleep through all your context? What if you dream of a world that doesn't arrive and wake up in one that doesn't want you? Maybe time travel through sleep isn't about arrival, it's about letting go. Of the things you missed, of the people who didn't wait, of the moments you never saw coming. So as your breathing slows tonight, and your dreams begin to stretch their legs, imagine a pod with your name on it, just waiting, just chilling, and maybe, just maybe, you'll wake up in a world better than the one you left. You exit the hangar and step into the open air, though air here feels older, heavier. The sky is darker than you remember, stained with dust and streaked with auroras that no longer dance but tremble. At the edge of a cliff sits an ancient clock, taller than a building, its gears moving at the pace of glaciers. Carved on its side, tick slower, think longer. Welcome to the long now and short tomorrows, where time stretches not just across minutes, but across millennia. And suddenly, urgency feels embarrassingly small. This paradox isn't flashy. It doesn't involve time loops, killer robots, or interdimensional flatulence. It's quiet, slow, philosophical. But it might be the most powerful of all. How do we build something that lasts longer than we do? The Long Now Foundation, a real organization, by the way, asked this very question. Their goal? To build a 10,000-year clock, a clock that ticks once a year, chimes once a century, has a cuckoo that pops out once every millennium, hopefully not too startling. The idea is to force us to think about time differently, not in quarters or weekends, but in epochs. Mainstream thinkers call this deep time thinking. It's the opposite of what your phone's notification system encourages. It's not, what do I do now? But what might people 400 generations from now thank me for? Assuming they still speak anything remotely like what you just thought. And here's your quirky nugget. One scientist proposed designing warning signs for nuclear waste that would last 10,000 years. The problem? Language changes, symbols change. What scares us now might seem friendly later. A skull today means danger, but in a few thousand years, it might be interpreted as pirate-themed party, bring snacks. Scientists still argue whether humanity is even capable of deep time planning. Our brains evolved to avoid tigers and remember where we left the berries. Not to chart social policies or climate strategy 700 years out, but we try. Cathedrals were once built by people who knew they'd never see them finished. Trees are planted by hands that will never sit in their shade. You step closer to the ancient clock. Its hands move barely perceptibly. One notch every 100 years. It makes your smartwatch look ridiculous. There's no alarm, no reminders, just presence, patience, intention. And maybe this is a kind of time travel, not the flashy leap, but the slow stretch. If we can build something today that endures, if we can send kindness, infrastructure, or poetry into the future, maybe that's the real paradox, touching tomorrow without ever leaving now. You pick up a note carved into the base of the clock. It reads, "This moment is your ancestor. Treat it with respect." So here's tonight's soft time reflection. We obsess over the next minute, the next day, the next trend. But the long now waits patiently behind all of it, asking, what if you thought bigger? What if time travel isn't about moving through time, but about expanding your view of it? What if you're not the protagonist of your timeline, but just a very lucky steward? So sleep slow tonight. Let your dreams take their time. Stretch your thoughts into centuries. Imagine a bedtime story whispered from the year 12,025, starting with your name. You turn from the ancient clock and descend a spiral staircase that wasn't there before. With each step, you feel lighter, like you're being peeled. Thoughts slip out of your head, names, birthdays, that embarrassing thing you said 3 years ago. At the bottom, you step into a glowing chamber labeled Chrono Neurological Reset Facility. Welcome to Chrono Amnesia, Forgetting the Future. Where memory isn't a timeline, it's a rubber band someone just let go of. This is the paradox of cognitive time loops. What if you knew the future at some point, but then someone or something erased your memory of it? The future happened. You were there. You acted. You traveled. And now you have no idea. Just a feeling in your gut and a craving for strawberry jam that makes no rational sense. Let's say someone from the future gave you a warning, a vision, a set of coordinates or a date. Maybe you saw something terrifying. Maybe you were someone terrifying. And afterward, you were reset. Memory wiped. But the consequences remain, quietly unraveling like a code running in the background. Mainstream neuroscience accepts that memory is a construct, reassembled with every recall, not like a file, but like a dream you keep tweaking. Add to that the quantum theory that consciousness may itself be entangled with time, and now we're talking paradox soup. Here's your quirky twist for the evening. There's a real phenomenon called cryptomnesia, where people vividly remember things they never consciously learned, like writing down a melody you made up, only to find out it's a 1920s ragtime classic. Did your brain just remix something you heard? Or did you briefly sync with a memory from another you, in another time? Scientists still argue whether time-related memory loss is just science fiction or a poorly understood quirk of human cognition. Some speculate that memory could act as a quantum anchor, tethering you to a timeline. Remove the memory, and you're set adrift, or redirected. In the center of the chamber, a chair waits. A curved visor hovers above it, labeled Undo Recall, Restore Temporal Neutrality. You sit. Why not? The visor lowers. There's a flash, then darkness. When your eyes open again, you're holding something, a note in your handwriting. It says, "Don't look for answers. You already found them. Just live like you forgot for a reason." Your fingers tremble. You don't remember writing it, but your bones do. There's a thrum in your pulse now, like you were meant to read it again. And here's the nighttime itch you can't quite scratch. What if forgetting the future is necessary? What if we've already solved certain problems, but the only way they stay solved is if no one remembers how? If remembering would cause us to try again, and fail this time? What if the price of peace is amnesia? So tonight, as you lay your head down, let the forgotten future rest with you. Let your memories blur, not with fear, but with trust. Not everything needs to be known. Not everything wants to be remembered. And if a new thought slips into your head, perfect, polished, and inexplicable, don't worry. It was probably always yours. You step through a soft blue curtain into what looks like a casual inventors club. If that club was inside a dream and partially run by your third-grade art teacher. There are blueprints floating mid-air, whiteboards scribbled in languages that don't technically exist yet, and softly ticking metronomes keeping time with no rhythm at all. Welcome to the secret society of unborn inventors, where ideas might not be born from the present, but borrowed from the future. Here's the thought experiment. What if inventors aren't creating things from scratch, but remembering them from timelines they haven't lived yet? You're handed a clipboard by someone with purple hair and 6 watches. It contains a list of inventions with suspicious origin stories. The sewing machine, the microwave. The first time someone decided, you know what this horse needs? Wheels. These things often appear without clear precedent. No paper trail, no obvious evolution. Just sudden, elegant emergence. That's the quirky heart of this paradox. Temporal leakage. Ideas bleeding backward through time. Inspiration that feels like a lightning bolt might actually be the subconscious echo of a future life. A whisper from the you who already built it. Mainstream science shrugs politely at this idea. Creativity, after all, is a complex soup of memory, emotion, sleep cycles, and caffeine. But fringe theorists dig deeper. They point to precognitive dreams, déjà vu, and those eerie moments when someone writes down a theory decades before the tools to test it even exist. Ever heard of the philosopher Auguste Comte? In the 1800s, he confidently said, "We'd never be able to study the stars chemically." A few years later, spectroscopy came along and proved him delightfully wrong. But what if that discovery had already happened, just not in his timeline? Scientists still argue whether knowledge truly travels through time, or if the brain is just weird enough to make it seem like it does. Some theories suggest the mind could be non-local in time, briefly dipping into what comes next, especially during altered states like dreams, meditation, or very, very long showers. You wander into a corner of the room and find a table covered in napkins, each with an invention scrawled on it, a silent typewriter, shoes that walk for you, a mood translator that vibrates when someone lies. You feel a twinge, a memory, a pull. One of them. You dreamed of it years ago. On the wall is a quote. "Genius is memory without a timestamp." Maybe the secret society isn't made of inventors. Maybe it's made of rememberers. People who tap into the future like radio stations. Not everyone can hold the signal, but sometimes someone does. And here's the paradox tucked under your pillow tonight. What if the timeline wants certain ideas to survive? What if, when the world ends one version of it anyway, some ideas find a way to leak backward? They don't arrive with instructions, just feelings, flashes, scribbles on napkins. So if you wake up tomorrow with an invention in your head you can't explain, don't ignore it. Write it down, doodle it, try it. You might not be the first version of you to think of it, just the first one to stay behind. You leave the inventor's lounge and step onto a bridge made of fractal glass, suspended over a river that flows both ways. One current rushing downstream toward tomorrow, the other curling upstream into yesterday. In the distance, a figure tosses a pebble into the water, and the ripples move backward. Welcome to reverse ripples, the future that changes the past, where causality isn't a straight line. It's a feedback loop with attitude. This isn't just poetic metaphor. It's a real, gnarly paradox. What happens when a future event changes a past one? Not through brute force, not through a time machine, but through subtle pressure, like the universe nudging its own elbow. You've probably heard the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings, and weeks later, a storm forms halfway around the world. But this is the mirror of that. A storm forms, and the butterfly flaps differently, like reality editing its earlier drafts to match a newer ending. Mainstream physics has some real fun with this idea, particularly in the context of retrocausality. In certain quantum systems, particles seem to behave differently based on measurements that haven't even happened yet. They act as if they already know what will occur, like the ripple that reaches the shore before the stone touches water. Your quirky paradox twist for tonight. There's an obscure philosophical theory called ontological design, which says that we don't just create tools and ideas, they reshape us in return. But what if that's not just psychology? What if, in some tiny way, the things we'll invent tomorrow are already adjusting the thoughts we're having today? You walk to the edge of the glass bridge and toss in a small, smooth stone. It hits the surface and then vanishes, never creating ripples at all. Instead, you hear laughter in your mind, a memory you don't remember having, a picnic with someone you haven't met, the scent of lemons and ozone, and suddenly it fades. Scientists still argue whether these effects are misread data, interpretive illusions, or hints of a reality more fluid than we thought. Some say retrocausality breaks the rules. Others insist the rules were never that rigid to begin with. You glance behind you. The bridge is shorter than it was a moment ago. The river's upstream flow grows stronger. A voice whispers from the water, "Be careful what you cause. It may have already responded." And here's the soft-edged contradiction to carry into your dreams. What if the universe doesn't simply record what we do, but converses with us? What if every action is part of a loop, your intention echoed back through time? That sudden burst of insight, that moment you change your mind, that one weird day where everything felt off. Maybe those were ripples arriving before the stone. Maybe the future isn't waiting to happen. Maybe it's watching you, steering gently, nudging softly, like a friend you forgot you had. So tonight, before you sleep, pay attention to the flickers, the déjà vu, the dreams that feel like warnings, the ideas you can't trace. Maybe they're not messages from the past. Maybe they're echoes from the world you're still about to build. As you leave the bridge, time itself seems to hesitate, just for a breath. The air thickens. The sky folds slightly at the corners. You step into what looks like a theatre, but the stage is empty. A velvet chair waits for you alone, facing a flickering screen. You sit. The projector hums to life. The title card appears. The life you didn't choose. Welcome to the shadow timelines, where every unchosen path continues somewhere, with or without you. This paradox cuts deeper than most, because it feels personal. You've made choices, big ones, little ones, and at every fork, a version of you took the road you didn't. What becomes of them? According to the many worlds interpretation, they go on living. In a branching universe, every decision spawns a new reality. One where you moved away, one where you stayed, one where you asked, one where you ran. All of them real. All of them populated with yous, genuine, whole, and slightly annoyed you won't text back. Mainstream science doesn't prove this, of course, but it doesn't disprove it either. Quantum decoherence provides the scaffolding, and interpretation fills in the emotional architecture. In short, the math says it's possible. Whether it's poetic or prophetic, that's still up for grabs. Your quirky twist for the night. A theoretical physicist once joked that your dreams might be leakage from those other timelines, like the you from Universe 13K is dreaming your life, and is just as weird and disappointing to them as theirs is to you. They also don't like Brussels sprouts, by the way. Scientists still argue whether these shadow versions of ourselves exist in any meaningful way, or whether they're just narrative ghosts, echoes of decisions we can't stop replaying. But emotionally, you felt them. The what-ifs, the alternate endings, the doors that never opened, or worse, the ones you closed yourself. The film begins. Scenes flicker fast. You graduating a year earlier. Living in a city you've never been to. Laughing with someone you've never met, but instantly love. A job you never applied for. A pet you never adopted, but who still waits for you by the door. Then, one moment that hits like gravity. You're standing in a kitchen. The light is different. The version of you looks older, or maybe just more certain. They turn toward you, and for a fraction of a second, they see you. Just a flicker of eye contact between worlds, and then they're gone. You sit back, stunned, as the projector winds down. So here's the soft paradox to drift off with tonight. If every version of you is real somewhere, then you're not alone, not even a little. You're one filament in a great web of possibility, a single echo among a trillion conversations. And maybe, just maybe, that's why some days feel heavier, some decisions harder. You're not just shaping your life, you're narrowing a cosmos. The weight of potential isn't light, but it is beautiful. So as you close your eyes tonight, remember, the you who turned left is still out there. The you who kissed them, who forgave them, who danced instead of hiding. They're not gone, just watching the same movie from another seat. And if you wake up tomorrow with a new dream in your heart, it might be theirs, lending you a little courage. You exit the theatre and step into a library where the books rearrange themselves mid-air, spines twisting, titles shifting, whole shelves reshelving as if correcting themselves. One book drops in front of you. It's blank until you touch it. Words appear on the page. Chapter 1. The story you're about to change. Welcome to the editable timeline, where your past isn't set in stone. It's written in pencil, and reality keeps an eraser handy. The concept seems wild, blasphemous even. Isn't the past supposed to be fixed? Isn't that what makes it past? Well, yes, but also maybe not. In some theoretical models of space-time, particularly those involving closed time-like curves, there's wiggle room. These curves allow for loops in time that don't necessarily break causality, as long as any changes you make self-consistently lead to the world you came from. You can edit events, but only in ways that preserve the overall plot. The footnotes might change. The headline stays the same. Mainstream physicists use this idea in mathematical models to explore paradox-proof time travel. They call it consistent histories, where any edits to the past are absorbed into the version of the present that makes them possible. It's reality as a smart text editor. It adjusts your timeline so the changes don't crash the file. Here's your quirky twist. Imagine you went back in time and gave your younger self a note saying, "Trust the cat." And because of that, you adopted a cat instead of a dog. That cat saved your house from a gas leak. You survived. You grew up to become the kind of person who, of course, would go back and write that note. Loop complete. Change accepted. Timeline intact. Scientists still argue whether this editable model reflects reality or just prevents headaches. But it opens up a strange, comforting idea. Maybe some of your memories weren't always what they are now. Maybe you altered something, intentionally or not, and your brain rewrote its own pages to match. You explore the library further. Each aisle is labeled not with topics, but with versions of you. You who left early, you who said it anyway, you who stayed silent. The books contain memories, some familiar, some completely alien. And yet, as you flip through one, you feel the faint tug of recognition, like a muscle memory of a life you never lived. At the back of the library is a return slot. It glows faintly. Above it, a sign. To rewrite, first let go. And suddenly, here's the paradox that puts your dreams on edge. If the past can be changed subtly, softly, without contradiction, then what counts as true? Is it the version you remember? The version that caused the least damage? Or the version that makes the best story? Maybe that one apology you thought you never made did happen in a previous loop. Maybe that friendship you lost was regained in a quiet rewrite you don't remember asking for. Maybe you're already living inside the third or fourth draft of your life. And maybe that's okay. So tonight, as your mind begins to slow and the pencil loosens in your grip, remember, your story isn't finished. Your timeline isn't locked. There's still room in the margins, room for edits. And if you feel a strange warmth in your chest, as if something unlived just became real, trust it. It might be a chapter finally rewriting itself. You leave the library through a narrow hallway lined with typewriters clacking on their own. Each one is writing a letter addressed to you. Some are tearful, some ecstatic. One simply says, "Stop buying discount time machines." You reach a heavy door and push it open. Inside, a living room. Familiar. Your couch, your coffee mug. But you are not alone. There's now you sitting there, looking just as confused. Welcome to the Doppelgänger loop, where you meet yourself. And neither of you was expecting it. This isn't a mirror. This isn't a dream. This is a full-blown temporal overlap, one of time travel's juiciest paradoxes. What happens when you meet your past or future self? Pop culture has opinions. Some say you explode. Others say time unravels like spaghetti under stress. But the real trouble? Identity drift. Seeing yourself from the outside, alive and independent, challenges the whole premise of who you are. Mainstream physics doesn't say such meetings are impossible, just complicated. If timelines can loop or split, then versions of you could end up in the same place. The real issue isn't physics, it's psychology. You've never seen yourself move before, really move. The weight, the gestures, the micro-expressions. It's unsettling, beautiful, and a little gross. Your quirky tidbit tonight. There's an old urban legend among time theorists. Yes, that's apparently a thing. That one of Einstein's unpublished notes warned against conversing with mirrored timelines. Not because it's dangerous, but because you might start to disagree with yourself. Think about it. If future you believes something totally different, does that invalidate your current beliefs? Or confirm that you were always supposed to evolve? You sit awkwardly for a moment. The other you sips your coffee and says, "This tastes terrible." You resist the urge to argue. They shrug. We both made it, after all. Scientists still argue whether self-interaction would be stable or cause feedback loops. In theoretical physics, some models suggest information passed from future you to present you could cause causal loops, but not necessarily break anything. Instead, the universe might just fold it in, letting both versions exist in the same frame, like harmony in a song. But here's where it gets existential. What should you say to yourself? Would you apologize? Brag? Ask for forgiveness? Advice a spoiler? Maybe none of it matters. Maybe the act of meeting yourself is the whole point. The self-awareness paradox that can only exist when you're literally watching you. Your other you finishes the coffee, stands, and walks to the door. They pause, hand on the knob, and say, "You're doing fine," even when you think you're not. Then they're gone. And maybe that's all you needed. So tonight, as you fall asleep, imagine you're not alone in your room, that somewhere, in some fold of time, there's another version of you sitting quietly nearby, not judging, not correcting, just witnessing, sharing this one fragile moment. Because if you ever do meet yourself, be kind. They've been through the same timeline you have, probably with worse coffee. You open the door and walk into a landscape that looks half-formed, like a video game still buffering. The trees are transparent, the ground pulses with grids, and the stars overhead blink in binary. You hear a whisper, not in sound, but in code. You are now in simulation frame 8. Welcome to the simulation glitch paradox, where time might not be a fabric, but a rendering. And you might just be a very well-written line of code. The simulation hypothesis has been floating around like philosophical perfume for decades. But the time travel angle gives it a fascinating twist. If we're in a simulation, who controls the clock? And what happens when the program stutters? Think about it. If time is being calculated, not flowing naturally, then time travel isn't about bending reality. It's about accessing different save states. Restore point 1984. Alternate patch 2049. It's not physics, it's file management. Mainstream scientists haven't proven we're in a simulation, but they haven't ruled it out either. People like Elon Musk have stirred the pot, suggesting that future civilizations might run ancestor simulations, ultra-realistic recreations of past societies for research, nostalgia, or possibly just extreme boredom. If that's true, we're characters in someone else's time experiment. Your quirky data nugget tonight. In 2017, a team of physicists ran a test to check for pixelation in space-time. They didn't find definitive proof, but they did find weird anomalies. Ultra-high energy cosmic rays that behave like light hitting the edge of a screen. Almost like the render limit of a very large, very nerdy computer. Scientists still argue over what a simulation would even mean. Would it change anything? Would simulated pain feel less real? Would time travel be easier because it's just loading a previous version of the timeline? You walk through a partially rendered forest. A tree freezes mid-fall, stuck in a loop of creaking. You glance down and realize your footsteps aren't leaving prints anymore. A nearby rock is labeled Prop Object 872. The wind carries a synthetic hum. Something in the sky flickers, then reappears with cleaner shading. And then the strangest feeling hits you. Déjà vu, but meta. Like you've not just done this before. You've been reset here. Multiple times. This is not your first rendering. You instinctively reach into your pocket and find a USB drive with the label, Breakpoint, do not load before morning. You pocket it. It feels like permission. Here's your dream-fuzzed paradox to fall asleep with. If we're in a simulation and time is just a code loop, then what counts as now? Are we running live or from cache? When you remember something, is it a saved state? And if time glitches, if déjà vu spikes, if the lights flicker, if you hear your own thoughts play twice, does that mean the programmer just rewound you? Or maybe you're the programmer, just temporarily stuck inside the code. So sleep gently tonight, digital wanderer. Whether you're carbon or code, soul or signal, doesn't matter. You're still the main character. even if the simulation runs slow sometimes. You exit the glitched forest and walk into a candlelit cathedral carved from obsidian and silence. The air hums with vibrations too low to hear, but too deep to ignore. On the altar lies a machine, covered in velvet and dust. As you approach, it activates with a single word: repent. Welcome to temporal karma, debt across timelines, where cause and effect might stretch beyond a single life, and across every version of you that ever was. The idea is ancient, but the paradox is fresh. What if karma isn't local? What if the consequences of your actions aren't just delayed, but distributed across timelines, echoing backward, forward, and sideways? In other words, what if you're paying for something a different you did? Mainstream ethics sticks to linear cause and effect. Do good, get good. Do bad, brace for a cosmic pop quiz. But some theories in quantum mysticism and speculative philosophy suggest time might not be as selfishly one-directional as we thought. That some part of morality, some ripple of intention, could reach through timelines like smoke in a cathedral, touching versions of you you'll never meet. Your quirky twist for the night. There's a thought experiment called pan-temporal morality, which asks, if you knew one of your alternate selves committed a terrible act, should you feel guilt? More haunting. What if someone else is suffering so that you don't have to? And even stranger, what if you're suffering to balance someone else's luck? Scientists still argue whether morality can have a quantum signature, if intention could somehow embed itself into the fabric of space-time. There's no evidence for timeline karma, but there's also no rule that says timelines can't be linked by more than physics. Maybe emotions, too, are a form of entanglement. You step up to the velvet-draped machine. It has no buttons, no levers, just a mirrored surface. You see yourself, not as you are, but as every you you've ever been. The kind one, the careless one, the frightened one, the one who never said goodbye. A display appears across the top. Moral balance, incomplete. Recalibrating across 47 local timelines. A hush falls over your thoughts. Not fear, not shame, just awareness. That your life is connected in ways you can't map. That the smallest mercy in this moment might bring peace to someone who looks like you, but isn't you. That every kindness might vibrate outward like a chord played on a harp of timelines. And here's your paradox pillow for tonight. What if justice isn't just about action and consequence within one timeline, but a delicate balancing act between all versions of you? What if being your best self isn't about being good for you, but tipping the scales in favor of a multiverse where fewer people suffer? Maybe some versions of you did awful things. Maybe others did beautiful ones. Maybe you're here to keep the middle path. So tonight, when you sleep, imagine every timeline flickering like a candle, some bright, some dim, some barely burning, and with each peaceful breath, maybe, just maybe, you send a little warmth through the glass, a little forgiveness, a little balance, because no matter who you've been or where you've been, you're trying now, and maybe that's what saves you, all of you. You exit the obsidian cathedral and walk into a vast desert under a shimmering sky. Time seems thinner here. Light bends wrong. Your footsteps echo before you take them, and the moon flickers between full and crescent, like it can't make up its mind. In the distance, a compass needle spins furiously on a floating stone. Welcome to the directionless clock, where time has no up, no down, no past, no future, just motion without meaning. Here's the twisty core of this paradox. What if time doesn't actually flow? What if it just isn't a static dimension like height or depth, but one we experience as a movement, purely because that's how our brains are wired? It's called the block universe theory, and in many ways, it's a darling of theoretical physics. According to it, past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, not as events waiting to unfold, but as co-equal slices of reality. You aren't walking through time. You're fixed in one spot. Your consciousness just scans the slices like a record needle moving across a vinyl groove. Mainstream science uses this model to make certain relativity equations work. It's neat, elegant, and depending on how you think about it, either extremely comforting or wildly unsettling. Because if everything is already out there in time, what does that mean for free will? Here's your quirky concept crumb. There's a tribe in the Andes that perceives the past as being in front of them because they've seen it, and the future behind them because it's unknown. They literally point backward when talking about tomorrow. Maybe they're onto something. Scientists still argue whether time is an emergent property, a quantum illusion, or a deeper structural feature we simply haven't decoded yet. Some physicists think our sense of time might just be the result of increasing entropy, the universe's slow slide into chaos. You feel time passing not because it is, but because things get messier. You kneel beside the floating compass. It doesn't point north. It doesn't spin to time zones. It responds to moments. Touch it while thinking of a memory, and it spins toward a version of that moment, cleaner, rawer, more complete. You think of something you regret. The compass snaps to it. You pull your hand away. And here's tonight's gravity-defying paradox. If the future already exists, and the past never really vanished, then what are you doing right now? Acting or replaying a script? But maybe it's not about control. Maybe it's about attention. You can't edit the record, but you can decide which notes to listen to. You can choose which part of the song you dance with. So tonight, let go of the arrow. Let go of the clock. Imagine time not as a stream pulling you along, but as a landscape. Vast, infinite. And you're walking it at your own pace, picking wildflowers from memory and possibility alike. And if you find yourself reliving something in your dreams tonight, don't worry. That path was always there. You're just walking it again. You leave the timeless desert and step into a corridor of mirrors, each reflecting not your face, but a different version of your life. In one, you're older. In another, younger. In a third, you're wearing a space helmet and petting what appears to be a genetically confused lion. Above you, in blinking letters, welcome to the Hall of Eventualities. Welcome to self-fulfilling prophecies, time's favorite inside joke, where the very act of knowing the future makes it happen. This paradox loops like a dog chasing its tail, but with more philosophy. Say someone tells you that one day you'll become a poet. You scoff. You hate poetry. But the thought lingers. You scribble something ironic. You show a friend. They like it. Next thing you know, boom, poet. The prophecy fulfilled because you heard it. It's a closed loop, a snake eating its tail. And it's been around since the earliest myths. Oedipus, Macbeth, every other teenager told, you'll grow up to be just like your parents. Mainstream psychologists call it a cognitive bias, belief influencing behavior. But physicists have their own spin. In some theoretical models, information from the future, however it gets there, can affect the present. Think about that. An event from tomorrow might quietly shove your today into position, not by force, by suggestion. Your quirky side theory of the night. There's an obscure belief that prophecies exist outside of time entirely. They're not predictions, they're anchors. Once you hear one, your timeline branches into two, one where it's ignored and one where it's fulfilled, and your awareness helps collapse the wave. Scientists still argue whether free will can coexist with a universe that contains fixed outcomes. Are you choosing, or are you reacting to a future that's already calling your name? You pause before one mirror. This version of you is content, eyes softer, posture more open. They're reading something you wrote, something you haven't written yet, scribbled in the margin. Heard it in a dream, just wrote it down. You laugh quietly. Of course, you walk further. Some mirrors reflect futures you never want. You look away. Others show wild, improbable versions. A beekeeper in space, a philosopher chef, a time-traveling librarian with no sense of direction. You pause in front of one where you're standing on a stage, smiling, speaking, and behind you, the words, "You always were meant to." And here's tonight's paradox, to fall asleep holding. What if the future is whispering not in commands, but in nudges, not in visions, but in hunches? And what if, by simply believing a possibility is real, you summon the momentum that makes it so? Maybe prophecies don't force you to act, they invite you. They say, try this path, see what happens. So tonight, if a strange thought enters your mind, an unexpected goal, a name, a story you didn't know you wanted, don't swat it away. That might be future you passing you a note, folded friendly, from a timeline where it all works out. You exit the mirror hall and find yourself at a train station with no clocks, no signs, no schedule, only one track, and it runs in both directions. A conductor stands by the platform. They smile and say, "Where you board doesn't matter. What you carry does." Welcome to causal inversion, when effects precede causes, where time might still go forward, but consequences arrive early, like anxious dinner guests. Here's the mindbender. What if your future decisions are influencing your present behavior, not the other way around? You think you're acting based on past experiences, but maybe those actions are quietly responding to events that haven't happened yet. It's not just philosophical fluff. Some models of quantum mechanics allow for a strange idea. Retrocausality, where outcomes at one point in time can affect earlier points. In one version of this, particles choose their state not just based on past conditions, but also on future measurements. It's like a movie where the ending changes what happens in the opening scene. Mainstream physics isn't unified on this. Some physicists think it's a misinterpretation of data. Others think it's the only explanation that makes the equations balance, without introducing weird observer-centric loopholes. Either way, it opens the door to one unsettling idea. Maybe you are being influenced by something you haven't done yet. Here's your quirky, causal tidbit for the night. There's a paradox known as the psychic delay, where people report knowing something before it happens, like avoiding a street for no reason and later hearing about a crash. Coincidence? Probably. But what if it's a kind of intuitive echo, a response to future consequences bleeding backward? Scientists still argue whether we'll ever prove or disprove retrocausality. But even without quantum weirdness, there's a softer, more human version of this paradox. Sometimes we change before we know why. We say no to things that once thrilled us. We let go of people we still love. And weeks, months, years later, we realize we were making room for something. You step aboard the train. It's empty. No lights, no conductor, no voiceover. Just the soft rumble of motion, though you can't tell which direction you're going. Out the window, memories play in reverse. Your childhood shrinking, old regrets unwinding, words you never said, whispered backwards like rain retreating into clouds. A slip of paper flutters down from above. It says, "You've already responded. Now you just need to act." And here's the paradox to lay your head beside tonight. What if every step you take has already been answered? What if courage isn't deciding blindly, but hearing a distant version of yourself asking for help? Maybe the best parts of you were seeded not by pain in the past, but by something beautiful in the future, reaching backward, guiding, calling, waiting. So as your thoughts soften and stretch into the dark, trust your hunches, trust your hesitations, trust the part of you that moves without knowing why. Because some decisions aren't decisions at all, they're echoes. You step off the timeless train and into a city made of whispers. The buildings shimmer in and out of style, Gothic one moment, cyberpunk the next. Street signs flicker through languages you never learned. The people walking past you, all vaguely familiar. You look closely and realize they're all you, just slightly off. Some older, some taller, some sadder, some in love. Welcome to Echo Cities, when time overlaps with itself, where layers of reality bleed together like overexposed film. This is the paradox of temporal superposition, a theoretical state where multiple versions of the present exist simultaneously, like quantum possibilities jostling for dominance. It's not the multiverse branching outward. It's the timelines converging inward. According to some speculative models of quantum gravity and time symmetry, the universe doesn't always operate in clean, non-overlapping slices. Under the right conditions, near black holes, during cosmic scale fluctuations, or in very weird dreams, moments from different times might stack, like a slideshow stuck on rapid cycle. Mainstream physics doesn't claim you'll see alternate versions of yourself strolling by, but the equations describing time symmetry do suggest that time isn't strictly linear at its most fundamental level. The laws of physics, bizarrely, don't require time to have a direction. That's our brain's interpretation. Here's your quirky overlap moment. In 1951, a man named Joffer Vorin showed up in a German village claiming to be from a country no one had ever heard of. He spoke broken versions of existing languages and said he was looking for a missing sibling. The officials couldn't place him, and he vanished soon after. Some call it a hoax. Others, a bleed-through from another timeline. Scientists still argue whether events like this are misremembered folklore, hallucination, or actual glitches in a tightly wound system. But the notion that time can fold in on itself, that places and people can exist in a fog of overlapping outcomes, it's seductive and oddly soothing. You walk into a cafe that seems oddly familiar. You've never been here, but you know the menu. The barista nods without looking. The usual, they say. You nod, heart skipping. At the next table, someone looks up. You again, but cleaner, happier. Maybe it's the version of you who left the job early, who wrote the book, who forgave first. You exchange a glance. Not awkward, not shocked, just kind, like travelers waiting out the same storm under different umbrellas. And here's your dream-brushed paradox for the night. What if the boundaries of time aren't as strict as they seem? What if, in moments of strong emotion, creative surge, or deep sleep, you slip, just a little, and touch another version of now? Maybe that déjà vu wasn't a glitch. Maybe it was contact. Maybe all your timelines are closer than you think, running parallel, then converging briefly, like birds resting on the same power line before flying off again. So tonight, let your thoughts drift through echo streets. Let the versions of you gather, compare notes, maybe even smile. You're not fragmented. You're layered. You leave the echoing city and enter a garden where the trees bloom in reverse, petals rising from the ground, reattaching to branches like time, politely undoing itself. In the center is a stone sundial, ticking backward. A quiet voice from the shadows whispers, "This is where endings begin." Welcome to Final Loops, the universe that resets itself, where the cosmos might not end with a bang, but a rewind, and you may have lived this all before. This is the paradox of the cyclical universe, a theory that says time and everything in it doesn't stretch infinitely forward, but repeats. Birth, expansion, heat, death, and then crunch, collapse, reboot. It's not just philosophy. Mainstream cosmology flirts with this idea through models like the Big Bounce, which proposes that after the universe expands and cools, it contracts and collapses into a single point, only to burst out again in a new Big Bang, over and over, like a cosmic inhale and exhale. You are here, mid-breath. In this model, time itself may not be a straight arrow, but a circle, or a spiral, or something stranger, like a Mobius strip made of existence. And if the universe keeps resetting, well, so might you. Here's your quirky bedtime echo. Some ancient civilizations already believed this. The Mayans, the Hindus, even Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence whispers the same theme, that you may live this life again, not once, not twice, forever. Scientists still argue whether entropy, the tendency for systems to move toward disorder, allows for this kind of loop. After all, wouldn't things get more broken with each reboot? Maybe not. Maybe time reverses along with the laws of physics at the point of collapse. Maybe it all gets wiped clean, like a chalkboard after a long equation. Maybe that's what déjà vu is, a tiny echo from your last run-through. You step toward the sundial. It ticks again, this time with a deep, resonant sound that shakes your chest. A petal lands in your hand, then floats back to its tree. The air smells like endings. Or is it beginnings? The sundial casts a shadow shaped like a spiral, not a line. You notice inscriptions around its base. One reads, "You've been here before. Welcome back." Another reads, "You'll leave again. Try something different." And here's the paradox to pull close as you drift off. What if your life isn't a single pass through the timeline, but a repeating melody? What if you're not here to do it perfectly, just differently each time? What if your deepest instincts, your strongest connections, your oddest dreams are just echoes from previous loops? Maybe the universe doesn't want perfection. Maybe it just wants variation, exploration, new routes through the same garden. So tonight, if you feel a strange familiarity in your dreams, if you sense that you've already walked these halls, spoken these words, loved these people, don't fight it. Smile. You're doing it again. You leave the garden and walk into a forest where the trees hum with low frequencies. The wind whispers across time zones. Hanging from the branches are clocks with no hands, just open faces, like they're listening instead of telling. As you move deeper, you realize you're not walking forward. You're walking across, sideways through history. Welcome to temporal drift. Sliding across instead of through, where the strangest way to travel time might not be forward or back. This paradox plays with a lesser-known but mind-bending idea. What if time isn't a line or a loop, but a terrain? A topography you can move through like a dreamscape. Not just through when things happen, but where they happen on the deeper structure of reality. In some fringe models of the multiverse, and a few brave interpretations of quantum field theory, there's speculation that time might have dimensions we don't perceive. You think you're moving forward in time, but what if you're drifting laterally, sliding from one version of history into another so subtly you don't even notice? Mainstream physics doesn't confirm this, but it's intrigued by the implications. In theories where space-time is emergent, where it arises from more fundamental ingredients, what we call time might be a shadow of something deeper, something more flexible, something less obedient. Here's your quirky trail marker. Some researchers have explored whether memory inconsistencies across large populations, like the Mandela effect, might reflect small, collective shifts between versions of reality. Most scientists chalk this up to suggestibility and false memory. But some say, quietly, and probably after their grant reviews are done, what if? Scientists still argue whether these lateral shifts are physically plausible or just poetic nonsense. But that hasn't stopped people from reporting odd flickers. Old injuries healed overnight, buildings appearing slightly different, key conversations no one remembers, a drift, a slide, a glitch, or a reroute. You stop beside one of the clocks hanging in the forest. It swings gently, like a pendulum without a pattern. You reach out, and the moment you touch it, the sky shifts slightly. The sun remains in place, but the shadows bend differently. Somewhere nearby, a bird sings a song you've never heard, but you know the lyrics. There's a note tied to the base of the tree. You didn't time travel. You just changed which version of now you were standing in. You blink. The path behind you is gone. And here's the paradox to tuck into your sleep tonight. If time has terrain, then memory might be your compass. Intuition might be your map. Maybe the feeling that something's off isn't paranoia. It's your system adjusting to a new slope in the timeline. One where history's texture is different, even if the scenery looks the same. So tonight, if your dreams feel unfamiliar but oddly nostalgic, if someone in your past seems closer than they should, if the world smells subtly different tomorrow, you might have slid. No panic, no danger, just a new angle of the same story. You step out of the drifting forest and into a quiet train yard under a sky made of moving equations. Numbers drift like clouds, glowing softly, while constellations pulse in Fibonacci spirals. In the center of the yard stands a single train, labeled the Observer Line. Its engine runs silently. It's not meant to move. It's meant to watch. Welcome to observer-created timelines, where simply looking might be what shapes the flow of time. This paradox leans hard into the quantum realm, where observation changes reality. At the tiniest scales of the universe, particles behave like ghostly waves until something or someone measures them. Only then do they collapse into definite positions. It's called the observer effect, and it's real. But what if it doesn't stop at particles? What if time itself only solidifies when it's witnessed? That means every moment you remember, every decision you reflect on, every person who recalls your name might be helping that piece of time crystallize into permanence. The rest? Maybe it remains mist. Potential. Background code in the universe's draft folder. Mainstream physics won't commit to that narrative, but it does dance around it. The famous double-slit experiment shows that electrons behave differently when you watch them. They go from chaotic waveforms to orderly paths, just because someone's paying attention. So what's really in charge? Cause or consciousness? Here's your quirky brain stretch for the night. Theoretical physicist John Wheeler once proposed the participatory universe, where observers aren't just passive recorders. They're co-creators of time and space. Reality doesn't just happen to us. It happens because of us. Scientists still argue whether this is a deep truth or a misunderstanding of measurement. But here's a simpler version. When you look at your past, reflect on it, remember it, it changes. Not the facts maybe, but the meaning. And if that's true, then your attention has gravitational pull. You board the observer line. There are no seats, just windows. Each one shows a different moment, not from your life, but from history. One window shows a medieval feast. Another, a spaceship docking. Another shows your childhood bedroom, with you asleep inside. And then the windows shift. Now they're showing possible moments, futures that might happen, regrets that didn't, love stories you never started, triumphs you never claimed. The train hums as if asking, which ones will you look at long enough to make real? You spot a small plaque near the control panel. It reads, "To observe is to choose, to remember is to build." And here's the paradox to nestle into your dreams tonight. What if awareness is the engine of time? What if the timelines you pay attention to, remember, imagine, daydream, regret, are the ones that root deeper into existence? Maybe time isn't just something that happens around you. Maybe you are time's narrator. So as your eyelids grow heavy, choose your observations gently, reflect kindly, dream vividly, remember like it matters, because maybe it does. Maybe every memory is a railway switch. And tonight, you're at the controls. You step off the train and into a room with no corners, just an endless curve, wrapping back on itself like a snake that forgot where it started. On the floor is a looping track, like a toy train set that runs in a perfect circle. At its center, a tiny sign that reads, "Caution, Bootstrap Paradox in progress." Welcome to the object with no origin, where time folds so tightly it forgets who brought what to the party. This paradox is a classic mind melter. It asks, what happens when something exists purely because it causes itself? No beginning, no origin story, no inventor. Just a closed time loop that creates and sustains its own existence. Here's the classic setup. Imagine a scientist receives a mysterious blueprint for a time machine. They build it, use it, and eventually travel back in time, where they leave the blueprint for their past self. So who actually invented it? Answer: no one. Or maybe everyone. This is the bootstrap paradox, named after the old phrase, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's not just quirky, it breaks your brain, because it suggests that some information, objects, or events exist outside of causality. They're caught in a loop with no entry point. Mainstream physics doesn't exactly endorse this as likely, but under certain theoretical models, like those involving closed time-like curves, bootstrap loops are mathematically consistent. They don't necessarily break the universe. They just exist, quietly mocking everything we think we know about logic. Here's your quirky bedtime twist. Some storytellers believe the Mona Lisa, Shakespeare's plays, or the pyramids could be examples of artistic bootstrap loops. Imagine if someone in the future copies these works and brings them back to the past, accidentally becoming the source of their own inspiration. Could culture contain echoes of temporally homeless genius? Scientists still argue whether information without origin is possible, or if something, somewhere, has to start the loop. But bootstrap paradoxes are stubborn. Once you accept the loop justifies itself. You can't point to the start because the start is the middle, and the middle is the end. You walk around the looping train track. On the third lap, you notice something new. A book on the floor. You pick it up. The author, you, the title. How I Learned the Paradox. You flip through. It's a story you haven't written yet. Or maybe you already did. Maybe you only will because you found this. Inside the front cover is a handwritten note. You didn't write this. You received it. Now finish it. You sit down beside the track. The little train whirs gently, forever chasing itself. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. So here's the paradox, to rock you gently to sleep. What if some things in your life don't have clear origins, not because you forgot, but because they never had one? What if your best ideas, your gut instincts, that strange dream you can't shake, are all bootstrap echoes, pieces of you looping through time, waiting for you to notice them? Tonight, don't worry about where it all began. Just keep the loop alive. You leave the looping chamber and step into a quiet observatory, perched above a sky full of stars that don't twinkle. They pulse like heartbeats. A telescope sits at the center, pointed not upward, but inward, toward a mirrored sphere floating in the air. On its base is etched, Project Chronos, time without time. Welcome to timeless zones, where chronology stops, where the flow of seconds can freeze, stutter, or vanish. And yet, you remain. This paradox tugs at the edge of what we think time must do, move. But what if there are regions of the universe, natural or artificial, where time doesn't flow at all, where nothing ages, nothing changes, where reality simply holds its breath? Mainstream physics admits the possibility. Near a black hole's event horizon, time appears to slow dramatically for the falling object, as seen by an outside observer. To the object itself, time feels normal. But from the outside, it's practically paused. These gravitational time dilations aren't just theory. We've observed them. Even GPS satellites adjust for them. But imagine a stronger version, a chronological null zone, a pocket of space-time where no time passes at all, a perfect freeze. Something goes in and emerges exactly as it was, even if the universe outside has aged eons. Now fold in your quirky night fact. In deep meditative states, some monks report feeling like time stops. Not slows, stops. They come out of hours-long meditation sessions convinced that no time has passed. Not sleepy, not unaware, just paused. What if, in some strange way, consciousness can sample these timeless states? Scientists still argue whether time is a fundamental property of reality or something that emerges from relationships between particles and entropy. If it's the latter, then in a region with zero entropy, exchange, no heat, no motion, no friction, time may not tick at all. You gaze into the telescope. Instead of stars, you see frozen moments, your 8th birthday cake, the first time you saw snow, someone looking at you with that look. The moments shimmer, not moving, not fading. They're not memories. They're still happening. Just somewhere else, somewhen else. A voice hums from the sphere. You were always here. You are still here. You have not yet been here. And now, here's the paradox that'll hum in your chest as you drift off. What if parts of your life aren't over? Not because you revisit them, but because they never truly left. What if the moments you thought were behind you are just paused, waiting, like constellations in a sky you haven't remembered how to read? Maybe that sudden rush of nostalgia isn't about the past. Maybe it's a message from a moment that never moved forward. So tonight, as your breath slows and your mind softens, let yourself step into a pocket of stillness. Feel what it's like when time doesn't push. When you are not late, not early, not aging, not escaping, just being, just this, just now, forever. You leave the observatory and descend a staircase that never quite ends, each step echoing with the sound of laughter, applause, thunder. You can't tell. At last, you reach a stage surrounded by empty seats. Above it, a glowing sign reads, "Everything happens, just not all at once." Welcome to chronostacking, the pile-up of time, where moments aren't spaced evenly but layered, sometimes absurdly close, sometimes shockingly far. Time, we like to believe, is evenly paced. A second is a second, a year is a year. But what if that's an illusion? What if events don't occur in sequence, but in clumps, like traffic jams in the cosmos? Imagine time not as a highway, but a junk drawer. Some days spill over with events. Others contain nothing but silence and socks. This is chronostacking, the strange, uneven distribution of cause and effect, where timelines swell and collapse unpredictably. Mainstream science entertains versions of this, particularly in nonlinear time theories. In physics, we know time doesn't behave the same in all frames of reference. A second near a neutron star is not the same as a second in your living room. And on a psychological level, time is deeply elastic. A minute on a roller coaster feels eternal. A decade of routine vanishes in a blink. Here's your quirky stack of time trivia. Some ancient calendars didn't treat time as consistent. The Babylonians, for instance, tracked days not by length but by importance. A heavy day might contain prophecy, harvest, and ritual, while a light day could be ignored entirely. To them, time was measured in meaning, not minutes. Scientists still argue whether space-time has microstructures, regions where events are denser or more chaotic. In one speculative model, timelines are like tightly wound spools. Pull the right thread, and entire centuries might unravel into a single moment, or stretch out so slowly you never feel them pass. You step onto the stage. A spotlight hits you. You say nothing. But from the rafters, scenes begin to fall, literal scenes. One from your childhood, one from a dream you forgot, one from a day that hasn't happened yet. They float down like feathers and land on top of each other, layered, stacked, coexisting. A voice whispers from behind the curtain. There is no before. There is no after. Just a depth of now. You reach into the air and touch one of the layered memories. It responds, soft and warm. You feel your older self touch it from the other side. And here's the paradox that folds into your pillow tonight. What if time isn't a straight story, but a stack of pages you can flip between? What if your past and future selves are acting together, collaborating across these layers, rewriting your story in real time? Maybe that sudden craving, that pang of regret, that burst of motivation weren't random. Maybe they were nudges from another now, stacked just beside this one, Maybe you're not a single thread in time, but a braid, woven, tangled, endlessly rich. So as your breath slows, picture your timeline not as a line, but a book left open, with moments layered like petals, some thick with feeling, some so thin you could sleep right through them. And if tomorrow feels different, heavier or lighter, that's just the stack shifting. You're still on the page. You rise from the layered stage and find yourself at the edge of a vast glass lake, so still it reflects not just the sky, but entire moments. Floating above it are hourglasses suspended mid-drip, their sand frozen. Across the surface, a boat waits. No oars, no captain. Just a small plaque that reads, "To cross, surrender what you know." Welcome to the forgotten futures, where possibilities slip away. Not because they never existed, but because you stopped remembering them. This final paradox is quiet, subtle, not a twist of time, but a fade. It asks, what happens to futures that don't come true? Not the big ones, winning the lottery or surviving a zombie apocalypse, but the little, tender maybes. The version of you that moved, or said yes, or stayed just 5 minutes longer. Do they disappear? Or do they wait, half-formed, like sculptures abandoned before the last strike of the chisel? Mainstream philosophy and speculative physics sometimes refer to this as the garden of forking paths. The idea that time branches endlessly, but you only walk one route. The rest? They recede. Quietly, forgotten not by the universe but by you. Here's your quirky paradox petal. Some memory theorists believe the brain doesn't just recall what happened, it stores alternate scenarios too. What could have happened? And those unrealized branches, they age, decay, and sometimes vanish. You can forget something that never occurred. Entire futures can be lost, without ever being lived. Scientists still argue whether this is cognitive noise or something deeper. But in quantum decision theory, even thinking about a possibility may temporarily affect the probability landscape. Your mind doesn't just imagine futures, it flirts with them. You step onto the boat. It glides across the lake without a ripple. Below you, scenes flicker beneath the water. A friendship you almost pursued. A job you never took. A stranger you almost said hello to. Each one glows faintly, then dims. Not out of punishment, just peace. At the center of the lake, a small orb rises from the water. It shows you as you are now, then as you were, then as you might have been, and then as someone you'll never be. It's not tragic. It's beautiful. A bouquet of timelines, once full of promise, now gently resting in the lake's archive. A voice echoes across the stillness. Futures don't die, they drift, and some become dreams. So here's your final paradox to curl around as you fall into sleep. What if the things you never did still shaped you? What if the versions of you that were never realized left traces, like wind on your skin or music heard through a wall? Maybe every unrealized future made you gentler, wiser, more aware of the doors you did choose to walk through. Maybe your life isn't just made of actions, but of all the quiet possibilities you let go with grace. So tonight, close your eyes and wave to those forgotten futures. Let them drift into the distance with no regret. They were never lost, just released. Let the noise fall away now. Let your thoughts uncoil like soft ribbons in a breeze. The futures, the paradoxes, the questions, they can rest now. You are exactly where you need to be. Not late, not early, just here, just now, breathing in gently, breathing out softer. The timelines are quiet, the loops have loosened, and the stars, they're waiting for your dreams. Let them carry you,